watching closely.
What's the secret, Max?
You just gotta find something you love to do and then do it for the rest of your life.
I don't want to be a product of my environment. I want my environment to be a product of me.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Establishing Shot, a podcast where we do deep dives into directors and their filmographies. We are here on episode 18 of the podcast, and this is the third episode of our Christopher Nolan series, jumping into his second film, sort of, I guess, his breakout in a way, which is Memento. I'm excited to jump into this one. We have a new guest on the show today, Philip Marinello. I didn't ask you how to pronounce your last name.
Marinello, you got it.
Yes, nailed it. Philip is he has a podcast of his own with some other guys called the Substance Podcast. Philip, I'm excited to have you on. You want to share a little bit about yourself and what you do, maybe a little bit about the podcast?
Sure, yeah, no, The Substance, and thanks for the invite, by the way, Eli.
Yeah.
No, The Substance, we are a bi-weekly show technically I think we're in the faith and spirituality category, but a lot of it's a variety show, meaning we've got a number of different types of episodes, and it's various topics related to faith, culture, the arts. We have a regular series on film, which is very much kind of down this alley here, called Substantive Cinema. We've been blessed to have several cool guests on that. Listeners may recognize some of those folks. Yeah, the last two guests we had on Substantive Cinema were actually Letterboxd employees, and those were both
I saw that.
a blast. But yeah, no, love movies, have loved movies from a very young age. Chris Nolan fan, we can get into that. I have been interested in Chris Nolan and aware of him since before Memento came out. I didn't see Following before Memento, but somehow, I don't know if I read it in a film magazine or on message boards or where, but I remember the hype surrounding Memento before it came out. So I was on the websites, I was reading the interviews. If there were like terrible 260p videos on the internet, I was probably watching those. I was all about Memento before it came out, and when it finally came out, that was a special time.
Yeah. What was kind of like your journey into loving film? Was that something like you got into as a kid or high school, college?
No, that was real young. My dad was a film lover, and it's kind of funny looking back on it now. A lot of the films that he showed me when I was pretty young, like older in elementary school and middle school, a lot of those films eventually ended up in the Criterion collection. He had pretty good taste. He showed me a lot of classics. But I mean, when I was little, I mean, I was watching, obviously the great Disney movies, but I remember like the 30s and 40s adventure movies I was really into as a kid. And I mean, I've just, ever since I can remember, I've loved the movies.
Yeah. I just watched The Adventures of Robin Hood with Errol Flynn with my 4-year-old.
That was one of the first movies I remember. Like when people ask me, what's your first movie? I don't know if it was The Adventures of Robin Hood, but that's the first movie that I have like burned into my memory.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I did a little bonus episode kind of as a filler that would have come out a few weeks ago now. And my son actually is on that episode, giving his like little 4-year-old
movies to show your kids.
Yeah. He's on that episode giving his like 4-year-old review of that movie and The Wizard of Oz that we watched recently.
Ooh.
It's really fun. Fun showing him those movies and seeing what he as a 4-year-old like gets out of them, like what's exciting to him is it's fun. obviously,
I'm
it's a
very
lot of it's
excited to
over his
show
head, but
my children Robin Hood.
yeah, 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 it's fun. So yeah, that's really cool. I I feel like so many of my guests like start with like loving film as kids,
Is
which
that
is
not your
awesome.
story? I don't know if I've heard yours.
Yeah, it's one of those things where like I watched movies as a kid, and I remember going to see the Disney movies with my parents, and loved Star Wars and those sort more like blockbuster stuff. So like
Star Wars was super formative, as it was with
yeah,
probably lots of people in our generation.
yeah, it's funny, it seems like Star Wars, like even more like, so Indiana Jones, I think for kids like in the 80s was like just as big as Star Wars. I was born in the early 90s, and I think by the time I was watching movies like that, Star Wars kind of was still like super big, and there were the re-releases were coming out like as I was
Oh, that
like
was a
starting to
blast. I
watch
remember
those.
that. Yeah.
I remember I saw well, it was A New Hope at that point in theaters as a re-release as a kid, and so but Indiana Jones at that point was like I I remember seeing them a long time ago as a kid, but it doesn't like wasn't as formative as Star Wars. But yeah, it's one of those things where I watched movies as a kid, and I watched a lot of movies, in high school and stuff. But again, mostly like just blockbuster stuff and comedies. And I really started to
Sure.
like get more into like watching film, I would say like later in college.
Nice.
Yeah. So,
I mean, it's
uh,
easy to sometimes be a snob, but I'm always trying to encourage people. No, like, just let them in. And the whole, like, oh, like, you haven't
yeah.
seen that movie? Like, there's plenty of classics that I haven't seen, and I've seen
Oh yeah.
thousands and thousands of movies. It's just like
Yeah.
we're all bound by time and interest. And I have a huge list of, like, big movies I want to see, but, like, the
Yeah.
last, like, 3 or 4 months of every year, it's, like, horror and holiday movies, and it's just hard to see too much.
That's true. Yeah, watch the same movies every year at Christmas time, which is
Yep.
great. I don't mind it one bit. Me and my wife actually watch Fantastic Mr. Fox every Thanksgiving. We started that a couple years ago.
Yep. No,
It's
that's
been a
a
fun tradition.
fall favorite of ours as well.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. But so Memento being your introduction to Nolan. So did you see it in theaters?
So
Then
no,
okay.
I remember seeing the poster in the newspaper, but I don't remember. I don't think it was that I was too young. I was definitely watching R-rated movies at that point. And I remember I got it on like VHS or DVD as soon as it came out. But I don't know if I didn't have an adult to take me or if it was playing so briefly. I grew up in Florida. I don't know. I remember seeing it in the paper, so I feel like there was a showing. I probably just couldn't get a grown up to take me at
Yeah,
that point,
sure.
I'm guessing. I don't have a vague memory of the theater, but I remember as soon as it came out, I think I probably actually, like, weird. Maybe it was DVD. It was either DVD or VHS. I got it
Mm-hmm.
right away.
Yeah. Yeah.
And watched it a
That
lot.
yeah, yeah, it's one of those yeah, we'll get into that, I'm sure, how rewatchable it is. But yeah, that's really cool. I was like completely unaware. I was in like
Well,
fifth
yeah, if you didn't
grade.
get in it till college, then yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I was like in fifth grade when this came out, and so just like totally not on my radar at that point in my life. But yeah, it's really cool and funny to like look back on uh how like the history, like you hopped on and like checked the website, like there's actually a website for
Yeah.
Memento.
Before
It's
we
like
started
Memento
recording, I remember
backwards.
Otnumum.com. I
Mm-hmm.
remember daily, like weekly, if not daily, checking that website for updates, like filming updates, like set
Mm-hmm.
updates.
Yeah, it's not functioning anymore. It's still
Yeah.
there, but
It has a
it does
landing page, but that's it.
right. Yeah, I hopped on there when I was researching, and I saw that was a thing. I was like, oh, let me see if it's still there. But
Yeah.
every time I clicked on
But it's
something, it
cool
was
that,
like,
but yeah, no, that was some very good memories. Like that was like the best, maybe not the best. You can do it like this, for example. You can do a lot of great things on the internet, but that was a very special time in the internet's development where
yeah,
communities of people who loved something could just have a great time versus the trolls and trash and all the
yeah,
advertisers and everything. Like that was the heyday of the IMDb message boards, and
nice,
I followed a lot more. I don't think I ever paid for anything. I feel like there was a lot of film journalists and blogs and like not just randos with blogs, but high like high quality film people would have blogs that I would read. Like that was peak internet in a way. I'm very grateful for a lot of the things,
yeah,
like my podcast and this. Like the internet does have a lot of great things, but it felt a little purer maybe at that time.
yeah, yeah. I feel like too, like I remember like hearing the website, there was like things that you could find, you could like dig deep into it, sort of thing, which was kind of unique at that point for a movie. But also like you couldn't just Google like, how do I find all the things in this website that are
Yeah,
hidden?
no, you had to put
Like
in the time.
you
It was
have
a
to,
lot of
yeah,
fun.
yeah. Like now you can just go on the Reddit board and someone will tell you all the secrets. It's it's not quite as fun unless you like force yourself to not cheat, I
Sure.
guess. But yeah,
No,
yeah,
I was very excited. I love film noir. I love detective stuff. I don't know if this was the movie that got me into Guy Pearce, or I already liked Guy Pearce, but I remember being excited about Guy Pearce around that era. Like
yeah,
it was a lot of the things. And I was a big and I still am. But I mean, that was kind of when my cinephilia was budding and I was all about the writer director, and I was like, ooh, like this guy, there's a lot of buzz around him. Like he wrote and directed his own thing. I'm sure I guess Memento had maybe premiered at a festival and it was getting ready to release wide. I wish I
yeah,
remembered it better, but I remember the build up being special.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, we can hop right into the kind of history of it. So the story kind of goes, which by the way, if I know I recommended it back on the first episode, but there's this book, The Nolan Variations by Tom Schoen, or Sean, depending on how he pronounces it. It's Shone. Um, it's a really good book that he kind of wrote in tandem with a ton of interviews he did with Nolan. So there's just a ton of insight into his career and all that. But a lot of my research is coming from that book. But
Nice.
yeah, so following, he had kind of realized when he was getting following going that if he wanted to like have a career in making movies, then he really needed to get to LA or somewhere like that. There just wasn't like um in London at the time, which is where he made following, there wasn't like, he couldn't do festival runs, like there just wasn't anything there as far as that goes. At least not at that time. And so yeah, he kind of comes to the US. He's on trying to take a car from Chicago, where he grew up, to LA, and his brother Jonathan, who I think the family calls him Jonah. They hopped in the car and drove it from Chicago area to LA.
Yeah, that's how it
So
started, I
that,
believe, right?
yeah, and that's where Memento all began. Jonathan kind of shared that he had like read about this anterograde amnesia, that Leonard in the film has, and kind of had this idea for a story about a guy that has this anterograde amnesia and is like
It's a
is
great
pretty
story device. Like if
undeveloped.
you're a storyteller,
Yeah,
like you don't want to overuse it. People can
right.
like soap operas surely overuse it, but it's a good device.
Yeah, and it's a unique one. That's that the story goes like he was telling him like about this kind of guy that's kind of unstuck from time sort of thing, and Chris Nolan is like, actually, yeah, that's a really good idea. He basically said, can I take that and write a script for it for a movie? And Jonathan's like, well, yeah, I guess so. And so they really like end up writing this like simultaneously. So like Nolan is writing the script and getting the movie made, and Jonathan is writing his short story sort of at the same time. So it's kind of one of those things where it's like it's an adaptation, but not really. It is an original screenplay.
They came out at the same time. It's kind of like one of those weird 2001 situations where the collaborate. In this case, they were brothers, but where two artists get together and they're like feeding off of each other and each kind of creating their own thing. I don't think 2001 is the only other instance that I'm aware of where like this sort of thing happened.
Yeah. So Nolan had actually, like, by the time Jonathan finally finished the short story, Nolan had already like wrote and like filmed the movie. So the movie was pretty much done. It released so it had like a festival run. But yeah, the short story released like I think a couple of weeks before the Memento officially like released in theaters.
Yeah, premiered. I think they wrapped.
Yeah,
and then it came out in a magazine, right? And then a little while later,
Esquire.
Like they kind of, I mean, man, really great timing.
Yeah. Have you ever read it?
Pardon me.
Yeah,
I remember reading some of it. I don't think I read the whole thing, but yeah, Memento Mori. I remember tracking it down after I'd seen the movie, and I'm a big reader as well as a movie watcher, but I don't think it grabbed me, or I don't know if I had to return it to the library or what, but I definitely didn't finish it.
Yeah. It's I went and found it. You can just Google it now, Memento Mori Nolan.
I'm sure it's out there, yeah.
It pops up. It's on Esquire.com. You can just go on and watch it. You just got to scroll through the ads is all. But yeah, it's not really even that long. It's I mean, it probably took me 15 or 20 minutes to read it is all. And yeah, it's really interesting. It's kind of a different a little bit of a different perspective, a little bit less like there's a lot less like characterization and plot. It's more just kind of like inside of his head. It's even written in like second person, but you kind of start to pick up on like that he's writing it. It's like he's writing it to himself, like the you is referring to himself.
Interesting.
And so yeah, it's interesting. It was fun to read it. But yeah, so Nolan, when he was writing the script, I kind of found that he said he was like constantly listening to Radiohead's OK Computer, which is funny. He and the reason he said that it was actually like kind of influential is because it was an album where like he could never remember what song was next. So so like if you're an album listener, which I don't listen to albums as a whole as much as I used to, but I used to like listen to whole albums straight through all the time. And so after you do that a couple of times, you kind of like get the rhythm of the album, like like okay, this song and then this song and then this song. And Nolan was listening to this and he could just like never remember what song was coming next. Just like
I like them fine. I'm very much an album guy, but I like Radiohead fine, but they were just never one that I spent lots of time with.
Yeah, same here. I think they're great, but yeah, I haven't spent much time with them. But I did think it was interesting that he like, that was, I guess, like more like atmosphere of more of like the atmosphere and the idea was kind of like influenced by that state of mind, I guess. Like, I don't know what's coming next kind of state of mind. and yeah, he kind of like was struggling with, how do I get this film in the perspective of this amnesiac? Like, how do I
Sure.
make this happen? And he just kind of like, I guess he was just musing in his apartment, and finally like had a aha moment of like, what, I can tell this kind of in reverse, um, which is just like, turns out to be like a brilliant move.
And what
Um,
is so you've watched I've seen Following, but it's been a long time.
mhm.
What was the device in Following? Remind me.
Yeah, so in Following, it's kind of this guy, he's following people. He gets kind of caught up. A guy notices he's following him, and basically like uses him. So it's kind of like told, you kind of have these visual cues of where you are. It kind of jumps around in the timeline of like, this is when he meets the guy and starts like robbing apartments with him. This is, now he has like a shaved face and clean hair, and he's wearing a suit. So this is
Yes. Okay.
after a
Yes.
certain
Yes.
point. Now he has like a beat up face. So this is like after a certain point. And you kind of end with like it being this whole like setup where they were using him to like, basically to frame him, with him being totally unaware. Like he's the framing device too is it starts with him basically like confessing to a police officer, and then so it starts with
Okay.
that and ends with that. That's kind
I
of
should
like
watch that again.
yeah, it's really interesting, and it's the only Nolan that has a Criterion
It is.
disc. Yeah, which is kind of strange to me.
Which is
But
nice because I
yeah.
tracked it down on like some sort of British import or whatever before it was on Criterion, back when you
Mhm.
had to work a little bit harder for it. I
Yeah, for
remember, but
sure.
yeah, I never picked it up because I feel like I love Criterion, but I feel like the supplements were not very generous on that, and I'm like, I don't know how many more times I'm going to watch Following, but I should maybe
Right.
check that out from the library or something.
Yeah, that's what I usually do if I'm like, well, I don't necessarily want to like spend money on this, but I do want to watch the extra features. Just check it
Yeah.
out from the library.
So probably spend way too much money on those biannual half off sales, but it's
Yes,
hard to say no to.
it is. My wife always like she jokes because my birthday's in July, and then there's Christmas, and there's always like a summer
Yep,
half off
July and
sale, and
November.
in November, yeah. And so my wife is like, "Oh, this is perfect. I can get you. I always know what I can get you for your birthday and
Nice,
Christmas."
that's perfect.
Yeah. Um, but yeah, it's one of the things that I thought was funny that Nolan says is like, so he wrote this. He actually wrote it as it plays out. So he starts with the same. He didn't like write it in chronological order and then reorder it. He actually wrote it as it actually plays out in the film.
Interesting.
Yeah, and so he said that in a way it's sort of the most linear script he's ever written. I guess kind of insinuating that a lot of his stuff he does kind of like write out and then kind of like move stuff around to play with in that way. And this one he actually like sat down and wrote it
And is that something?
straight through.
So, I mean, I don't know when you want to get to this. How do you feel about no? I mean, Nolan's big thing is time, and I
Mm-hmm.
feel like
Yeah.
sometimes he does that more successful than others. But is that something that's still exciting for you? Like for me, like Memento is maybe the most exciting, and that was
Yeah.
kind of like his first one, which is sometimes a bit of a bummer. But
Yeah.
it's very interesting.
Yeah. So like I would say for me, this one and maybe Dunkirk are probably the two that like time is the most interesting thing about the movie for me.
My number 1 and 2 on my
Um,
ranked list.
Yeah. I have other. So I there's several movies by Nolan that I really love. Interstellar is probably one that is like the most like it has, good general ratings, but it's probably the most controversial of like, I really love Interstellar, or like, it's fine sort of thing. I love it, but the time aspect is
It's
not
hard.
quite as interesting to me about that movie. There's other things about it that are more interesting to me and reasons why I love it. But
Interstellar
yeah,
was one where my former co-host loves it so much that he like pushed for it to get covered on a substantive cinema, and like I like it more, but I feel like it kind of doesn't add up exactly, and I hate people who are like the logic police, and I know Neil deGrasse Tyson said it was cool or whatever, but I'm just like, I feel like it fundamentally kind of doesn't work. But if I like shut my brain off in a way, like I feel like it's either a 3.5 star, or like a total 5-star masterpiece. And I kind of go back and forth on it. Like sometimes I go, no, like it's beautiful, it's incredible, but also I go, does it even work at all? Like I feel very both ways about it.
Yeah. It's so like people that feel that way about it, I'm like, yeah, I totally get it. I'm one of those people that like, I'm not really the sort of person that like sits in a movie and like I like have to figure it out before the movie's over.
I don't do that at all.
I tend to try to let movies happen to me. And so like and then like sometimes like you go back and think through like how it played out, and sometimes it lessens it, sometimes it doesn't. So like for this movie, obviously like there's just like a big like reveal, like, oh, this is what's been going on, sort of thing towards the end, which we'll get into. But then like
but
there's
chronologically
movies like
that's in the middle too, which is interesting as well.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, but then there's movies like a movie that in the moment I thought was really fun, but then like immediately afterwards I thought was like, that doesn't really work, is Now You See Me.
Okay.
Do you remember that one?
Is that the magician one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like
very strange.
Yeah.
I always give my wife grief about that one. That like one of the times when it came out, she said like that she liked it, but in my mind she's like, oh, I really like this movie, and then I saw it and I was like, interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Like, it was a fun enough watch.
So it feels cheap to me. Like so like movies like
it's literal magic, and I was like, that's not the whole point.
Yeah. Yeah, so like this one and like The Sixth Sense. So when you go back and rewatch these movies, you can see like all the clues.
Sure.
If you go back and watch Now You See Me, like there's no clues. They could have thrown anyone in there because it's like quote unquote magic. Like it's just like it feels cheap on rewatch, and it feels cheap when you think about it for more than like 5 seconds. And so like it's really like it really does, I feel like, take a precision and a really like creative mind to make a movie like Memento that like stands up to that test. And yeah, he really did. Like he says like when he was making this movie, he really did try to like tend to that precision. And it's probably just you have to have the right kind of mind to like think about all those details.
Well, and it wasn't just for like, one of my major complaints with Nolan's later work is that the formal attributes kind of outshine the movie. Like this is one I've seen Memento loads of times, but it's been a while. Like I don't know if I've seen it in the last 10 years. And if I have, it was maybe one time. I saw it a ton when it came out, but like I remember Leonard, I remember Teddy, I remember Teddy / John G, I remember Sammy Jenkins, I remember Dodd, because that was a thing. Like other than the Batman stuff, I'd be hard pressed to like name a Nolan character, because I feel like they're not really characters, they're like ciphers for ideas. And like, and that's not invalid, but like not that the Memento characters are the deepest, because it's very noir, but they feel human. Their motivations are very human. And like we talked Interstellar, I'm mixed on it, but even when I like Interstellar, I'm like, I feel like it almost doesn't even earn the emotion in a way, because it is also cold and calculated. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I really feel like Memento and Insomnia and maybe The Prestige were like the most like heartfelt, where like you actually care about these characters, and that's
Yeah.
what I like more. Like I love spectacle, but I kind of feel like Nolan is so into his ideas that it's the characters can sometimes suffer.
Yeah, and Nolan is so in an interview about this movie, he is very upfront with the fact that someone had asked him about the character and the humanity of the character of Leonard, and he was very upfront about like, I wasn't really thinking about it in that way. He's like, I tend to write my scripts more like thinking about it like from a distance and as a puzzle. And he said it really wasn't until Guy Pearce came on and was like, asking questions. And like he said, Guy Pearce really is the one that brought the humanity to that character.
And you can feel that for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And which I kind of respect. He's like, not like, oh yeah, like, yeah, I wrote this. he was like very upfront with the fact that like, well, no, actually, like, I was pretty distant from it emotionally, and this great actor came alongside me and made it even better.
And that is so interesting. Like, I joke, like I do like Chris Nolan. I respect him maybe even more than I like him, but he does feel a little bit robotic sometimes,
yeah,
and very sterile.
Yeah, and I think that's probably like I feel like the movies. So like Dunkirk, it kind of is supposed to feel that like that, and so it works really well. It's not really supposed to be this like there's not really like deeply emotionally connecting characters for you to connect with. It's just kind of like this, I don't know, it's kind of like an experiment in like filmmaking in a way.
Sure.
And
But
like
that one really worked.
Visual storytelling.
Yeah.
And again, like another thing for that one is there's really not any exposition. There's no rules to explain. You just watch it, which is probably
I think
to its
also
strength.
maybe his shortest full length feature as well too, which doesn't hurt.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah. So like for Interstellar, for me, I think for me personally, McConaughey really like, I guess like captures the emotion well. And so I'm really able to connect despite like the distance of the writing that, Nolan is kind of upfront with like, yeah, this is kind of how I write. For me, it's like, I really connected with McConaughey's interpretation of that. And that's just one of those things that's so subjective. Like either you connect with his interpretation of this character or you don't.
Sure.
And it's just kind of one of those things. And that's why like some people are like Interstellar's like an incredible film. And some people are like, well, it's okay. It's kind of, it doesn't really work for me.
Yeah, for me, it really does depend on the day.
Yeah.
Like I've gone back and forth. Like it is so impressive. It's kind of a masterpiece, but then also I'm like, what even is this? But with Memento, like what everything is. Like,
yeah,
I like The Prestige. I enjoy Insomnia very much, but like Memento felt so grounded. Also, like I love, like film noir is maybe my favorite like genre. Like, I mean, I love all movies. Like, there's nothing I don't like. But I mean, I think it was so formative for me, and when it's done well, I feel like it's undeniable.
Yeah, and I think that's probably like a reason why Memento works so well is because it's so grounded in that genre. With Following, I remember hearing Nolan talk about how he felt like he could play with the time in it and like where you were in the narrative because people kind of knew, like, I'm in a film noir and this is kind of generally how it's going to play out. And so, like, your audience is kind of like, they're primed for you to be able to experiment and do something different, because in the end, they know this is how a film noir plays out. You can kind of like jack with everything in the middle,
okay,
because
interesting.
they understand
right,
where it's going. You know,
I'm looking at the timeline. I was a Guy Pearce fan because LA Confidential, also
yes,
in the film noir world, came out a few years earlier.
exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
God.
And, yeah, that film noir is like a big influence on Nolan. I think really you can see its influence in a lot of his movies.
Yeah.
One, you know, after Insomnia, you know, you see it in the Batman movies, you see it in Inception, and even The Prestige.
Oh, very
And
much so.
yeah, it's so, and you know, he kind of talks about how, you know, you're part of the reason he loves that genre and is so influenced by it is because part of the structure of a noir is that you're supposed to get lost in the plot. And that's just kind of like how he thinks. He gets lost in these ideas.
Following
so-
the character. And for this, it's exactly like you are lost, like Leonard is lost, because
Yeah.
he literally can't, with the way the movie's chopped up, even if you know the movie, I haven't seen it in years, but I remember all the beats. I was like, where are we? When does that happen? Like, because I was like, I thought there were a couple different things that I thought happened earlier or later. Like, it always keeps you kind of like off balance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's fun too with this one. So like there was, you know, I guess like a small tradition of amnesia movies. Like you have like Spellbound by Hitchcock, and which I saw recently, and a few others. But one of the things he liked about this idea was that it kind of breaks that tradition in the fact that this character knows who he, I guess you could say, is or was.
Yeah, they had that line about that too. He's like,
yeah,
I'm Leonard Shelby. Da, 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 da. He goes, no, like that's who you were.
Right.
A lot's happened since then.
Right. And so you kind of have, it's a little bit different. Like he's not like this guy that's like, I don't know anything about myself. Like he knows in a sense who he is, but it's still like, you can take that and then play with that idea in a different way than you can with someone who just like completely doesn't know who they are.
Yeah.
And so, yeah. And another, like a couple of movies that he mentioned influence wise, one was one that I haven't seen, Angel Heart by Alan Parker. I don't know if you've ever seen that. But he talks about that being an influence in the sense that there's a twist, like there's a big reveal twist, but the storytelling plays fair. We kind of talked about that. Like, it's not this twist that like you can't go back and see the evidence of. Like the storytelling like really plays fair with the audience. So like when you get to the twist, if you go back, you can see like how you got there. And then Blade Runner, which is like he always like talks about as one of his big influences for just his love of movies, his career, but yeah,
is Blade Runner a big one for you? Is that one that you like?
It's not. It's one that I like. But yeah, it's probably one that I would like more on a rewatch. But I wasn't like super captivated by it when I saw it. I probably watched it a few years ago for the first time.
Oh, okay.
And it's probably one of those things where like I've just seen other things influenced by it, and so it's not as impressive.
So many people are like. Blade Runner is one that so many big directors or like working directors are influenced by. Like, yeah, it's a seminal film. It's one of my favorites. I remember the first time I saw it feeling, and I'd been watching movies for a long time by that point, but I remember feeling like my life had changed almost when I saw that movie.
Yeah. Yeah. And so it's more just like, I'm very positive on it. Like I really think it's a great film, but I don't think like I was blown away. It's probably one of those expectation things, you know, it's built up so
Sure,
much.
if they're like, oh, Blade Runner, and you're like,
Yeah.
oh. Well, and also there's a lot of different cuts, but there's 3 main cuts, and it's like,
Right.
which cut did you watch?
Right.
The latter 2 cuts are pretty similar. I do think the final cut is the best cut, but I grew up watching the director's cut. I don't think the theatrical is bad, but I don't think it's great, and I understand
Yeah, I
that
can't
people
remember
saw
which
the
one I
theatrical.
watched.
Did it have narration?
I think it had some. I think it might have been the director's cut.
Okay, the director's cut did
Maybe
not
it didn't
have
have. Maybe it didn't have it. I honestly need to watch it again.
Yeah, but that's a big one that does deal with like memory and identity,
yeah,
humanity, and like what does it mean to be a sentient being and all that.
Yeah,
which I'm a big sucker for.
Yeah, same, and yeah, Nolan kind of says he carries a lot of those ideas over into this one, which you can totally see. But yeah, this one is one that, of course, his now wife Emma Thomas got in the hands of a production company. I think it's Newmarket Films. And yeah, the guy liked it and gave them $4.5 million. And it's funny, you know, a lot of people think about, you know, Batman. They'll say like Batman being his biggest jump, or even like maybe Insomnia being a studio film. But as far as Nolan's perspective goes, he feels like this was like his biggest jump. Because
I think percentage wise, right? Because maybe Following was made for a couple grand, and then you go to 4.5 million. Percentage wise, that's a lot.
Well, really, like Following was kind of a zero budget film. Like they used like old equipment, and then really like the only money they spent was on the film stock. And it was just his pocket money. Like he got a bonus from work and bought a bunch of film stock, sort of thing.
Well, yeah, they shot really that over a long period of time too, because of that.
A whole year. Yeah, and so it really was a zero budget film. And so Nolan jokes that he, you know, with this film, he really goes from like hanging out with his friends and his mom making them sandwiches to like using $4.5 million of someone else's money.
Pretty crazy.
Which, like, when you think about it, is like a humongous jump. And so like, and it's interesting, you know, a lot of times it feels like nowadays, like if a director makes a film like Following or Memento, then like they're immediately like someone like tries to snatch them up and like make a Marvel movie or something.
Yeah, or like reboot something. And I feel like if those things really are going to be
to that.
Yes.
Yeah.
If those things are going to be what gets made, I would rather have talented people subvert them some. And I mean, yeah, Nolan made Batman, but like,
right.
You hate to see people who are originals kind of get sucked in to the studio system. I just saw Denis Villeneuve saying after Dune 2, he wants to make another Dune. And I'm like, okay, cool. But like, can we get him back though, making his own movies?
Right. Yeah, I feel similar to like Greta Gerwig. You know, she's like, you know, I want to make
that's interesting.
studio
Yeah,
movies.
She's going the studio way now.
I guess that's a good thing. You know, we have to have somebody that's like talented and like thinking differently in the studios. But there's also like the piece of me that's like, yeah, but let's make more like Ladybirds. That's really
exactly because it's like, do we need more Narnia movies? But if they're gonna make them, I'd rather have a talented person make them.
Yeah, it's a catch-22, I guess.
Yeah,
as far as that goes.
Well, especially how much time and energy the big stuff takes. Like the big movies take years and years, and it's like maybe in like the Greta Gerwig Netflix thing, you can crank them out. Because I don't hate like the old Hollywood model. A lot of great stuff got. There were good things about the studio model, like with contracts and infrastructure. Like you did every movie, like they had their own budgets, but like if you shared sets and actors, you could maybe get somebody for a reasonable rate, and you don't have like one of the principal actors taking up $15 million just for their own salary. So like pros and cons, but I do prefer original storytelling.
Right. Yeah, I feel the same way. I guess like you said though, if we must, then let's get some good minds in there, like some good people with some good vision, I guess,
Yeah, I think Nolan is one of the very few,
mhm.
maybe like 2 or 3, who can get a good budget for an original idea. There's not a whole lot of
Yeah.
those people out there.
Mhm.
I think it's like
Yeah,
him, Tarantino, and Jordan Peele, it feels like right now.
yeah. Yeah, he's one of the very few, I think I mentioned this like in the overview episode, that he's like one of the few that can walk into a studio with an completely original script and walk out with a several $100 million budget.
Yeah.
It's
Which is
really
a little
like,
crazy.
it is, but it's a testament to, I think, um, I had written in my notes somewhere that Nolan, um, this was like what kind of cemented in his mind the idea that you can, um, make a make a movie that challenges your audience, with a big budget, and like still it still be like a big hit, like a big, um, you know, get people to the theaters, like
Yeah.
blockbuster kind of thing. Which which I really appreciate. And when you really think about like now, when we look, if you watch like the Batman trilogy now, like it's like, oh yeah, like a lot of people are trying to do this sort of like dark superhero movie, but that was like a
Sure. All the
totally,
wrong lessons. Yeah.
he was doing like something totally new with it at that point.
Well, yeah, the first one was a noir, and the second one
Mhm.
was Heat, and the third was kind of a mess, in my opinion.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And so like, he's doing something different, and then he's also like in the middle of the, like, he took his time with them, like he didn't really let the studio like push him around. He was like, well, we'll make, they really like made one at a time, is how he talks about it. Like, I
Yep.
made
I
Batman
think that was
Begins.
very important.
Yeah, I made Batman Begins. I had another thing I was working on, which turned out to be the Prestige, and then like after that period of time being away from the Batman, like Batman Begins, he was like, okay, I think we can do another one now, fresh, like with a, and so yeah, that super. I feel like that just doesn't. There's not a whole lot of space for that sort of thing now, and Memento. I don't know, like, it's funny because so Memento gets made, um, and then they take it to all these, like, they do some screenings for distributors,
Yeah,
and nobody
everybody
wants to.
loved it, but
Yeah,
all the distributors were afraid that the
right.
audiences were too dumb. They're like, "This is great. We're afraid the audience is too dumb to get this."
Yeah, yeah, and it's just so funny. Like, they were like, "Hey, we love this. Do you have, what else are you working on?" sort of thing. And Nolan says like everyone rejected rejected us. And so Newmarket Films actually like created a distribution arm just for this movie, um, and got it out there. They did a festival run, which Nolan talks about going to the premiere at Venice, which is where it premiered, and for the first time. And he, like, sneaks in, and he's like super nervous. Big film festival, and there's like this moment, the movie ends, and there's like this moment of pause, and then like he actually got like a standing ovation, and he said it just meant so much to him that there was this moment of like, wait, what just happened? And then like everyone like realizing, wow, that was incredible. And he just talks about like this festival run being like, these distributors are totally wrong. The audience is totally getting it.
Well,
Um,
studios are
yeah,
often wrong about that.
yeah, and so it ended up like, it's one of those movies that like grew its box office like throughout its run.
Well, that's crazy to think about too, right? Like,
Mhm.
if they didn't distribute it themselves, we might not have Chris Nolan.
Yeah, yeah, and it's a testament to like, one of the things I've learned doing this podcast so far is that the community of people that you have around you, like, really it means a lot for that creative community is super important. With this one, for this film, it was, that Newmarket Films and the guy that like gave him his budget, that like believed in it enough to like put their careers, or or at least a lot of money on the line, to get this in front of people. For Insomnia, which we'll talk about next week, it was Steven Soderbergh, like basically like marching onto
Oh yeah,
he
Steven
marched onto
Soderbergh
Warner
was
Brothers lot and
he
said,
was
"You better
very
give this
much his
guy a
champion.
chance." Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it's that creative community that like
Which
you
with
really
Insomnia
need.
too, even with Soderbergh banging the drum, they still had him do a remake before they let him do something original again.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, it's really crazy how just like how studios work. Yeah, I wrote down some of the like reception things. So like at the time it released, you have like New York Times saying it's an existential crossword puzzle, which is funny coming from the New York Times. Variety said it was delectably disturbing. These are some great like little tidbits like that you can throw on your movie poster for when it's going to DVD. But yeah, it ended up making like over 40 million worldwide gross.
Yep. 10x its budget. That's pretty great.
Yeah, really incredible.
And I think like a lot of it had strong word of mouth, like because it is kind of a hard movie to traditionally market. I remember a lot of it was just like fans talk, like, "Oh, did you hear about this? Did you hear about that?" Like, "Oh, like,
yeah,
this is something special." Like, it had strong word of mouth that I feel like is pretty challenging with all the noise now. It's just kind of hard for a movie to do that. Like sometimes it happens, right? But not often.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, kind of recently with Barbenheimer, that was like an internet joke that turned
that
into
blew
word
up.
of mouth. But that's not like, oh, this is so good. It's like, isn't it funny? Isn't the counter programming amusing?
Right. Yeah, that was kind of like a very like happy coincidence, and like very like smart on the distributors and the studio's part to like keep those, because they very easily could have moved the dates for those. As they
but
often
the result
do.
was a cumulative. I just checked the box office today. Cumulatively, over $2 billion between the two, which is pretty wild.
Crazy.
Barbie, I think, is now the top 18th grossing movie of all time.
Yeah, it's up there. I haven't checked in the past couple weeks, but it was
of
gaining on Super Mario Brothers movie.
Yeah, that's the
which
one
is
to
another
beat
one from this year.
That it might. Yeah, some of these movies still hit.
Yeah,
hit
real hard. It's funny to me, like, it's one of those things where it's like, is theater dead? And it's like, well, you have these movies making $1 billion, so
Not
I don't know.
All.
I don't know about that idea.
They need to get creative.
Right.
They need
it's IP movies mostly, but
that's the thing. Like, if everything is part 6, part 7, part 8, like that's going to get tiring after a time. And then you have Barbie is technically an IP movie. Right. Oppenheimer is like a biopic based on like a 700 or 800 page book. Like, those are both very different, but it was driven by the creators, like the writer director who had a vision. And those are always the most exciting movies for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, if they are like, oh, we're going to make several more Barbie movies, I would like put money on them like progressively being like less and less quality.
Anything that they make, and I'm sure they will, because studios don't usually learn the right lessons, and they've already greenlit. I don't know if you saw, I think it was the Variety article. They're already in production for like 8 different Mattel IP movies, and it's like, I'm sort of curious about Daniel Kaluuya's Barney, but like, that's not the lesson we should learn from Barbie.
Right.
Nothing coming after it is going to do what it did, even close.
Right.
It's at $1.3 billion.
Yeah.
Nothing else is going to come close to that. Even like Barbie 2 with Ryan Gosling and Margot Robbie. That probably won't crack $1 billion because it's not fresh.
Right.
So like, try to learn the right lessons and enable the people with original voices to come after to do things that interest them.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's. I think this film like it really is like a testament to the importance of creative minds like sticking to like what interests them. So like people can think what they will about like Christopher Nolan and the trajectory of his career and like what of his movies are actually like good. But like he sticks to like his kind of creative space. Like his movies all kind of inhabit this like, hey, let's take a strange like kind of philosophical idea and like make something really big with it that that is like visually like impressive, but also like is kind of a philosophical puzzle for audiences to talk about, and really like he's kind of stuck to that through his whole career, and hasn't really strayed from it.
He's a big puzzle box guy.
But man, it really is one of the things though that I think that people maybe don't talk enough, because he's got these huge budgets now, but when you go back to these first couple of movies that are way like he's working with way less money, way less like production, like big production stuff, like so like one of the things that like he does is he doesn't use a monitor. He's by the camera when they're shooting. He's like in the space, like, and so like it's one of those things that the way he shoots and the way he like thinks about how the movie's going to be like produced and put together, I think is actually like really like sort of underappreciated about him. It's not something that people talk about, but when you think about this movie and the way like where he puts the camera is like so purposeful. Like, you have the timeline in color. You have so many shots that are like,
which he's worked his
so
way back
close
to now with Oppenheimer, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you're so close. You're like so in his space, and there's a purpose to that, which is like he's wanting you to have like his perspective. He's wanting you to like get that subjective experience of what like Leonard is experiencing, what he's like thinking, what he's seeing. And so like, it's one of those things that's like his camera work and the way he like blocks his scenes and that stuff is very like well thought through. But I feel like with the discourse around Nolan is rarely about like what he does with the camera and more about like
artistic. I mean, part of me feels contrarian, but I go like, this might be his best shot movie. Like I know that the big special effects shots of the other movies, but I really think about this and The Prestige as like really like well told visual stories.
Yeah. It really is.
I mean, Dunkirk, I guess, in a way, but like that was more, I don't know, like
it still has
broad,
that big production feel to it.
Yeah.
And this one is really like, I don't know, like there's really like cool, like I guess like more trivia stuff, like the opening shot, which plays like in reverse, like which you don't realize at first.
That is
they shot that with a reverse mag, so they shot it. So like if you're listening, you don't know what that means. It means like basically the film runs backwards. They're like they shoot it, and obviously they're not going backwards, and the things aren't happening backwards. They shoot the scene as it plays out, but the film is going backwards. And so like they didn't like take the film and like edit it to be backwards. They actually like shot it in reverse. Like the physical film is going in reverse so that when you play the film forwards, it's in reverse. It's kind of hard to explain now that
No,
I'm
it's a
saying
cool
it out
little
loud.
trick. And
But
like,
yeah.
I remember, and this was in the era in the early 2000s. I mean, we're both at a very different stage of life, like married with kids. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't have big movie parties often anymore. But
Yeah.
like, this is one came out when I was in high school. I would show this to everybody. This
Yeah.
was one that like you get people over, you show them, and right away from that first scene in back, like everybody's gripped. Like you
Yeah.
notice the Polaroid starting to get blurrier. You're like, oh, like this is going backwards, and then
Yeah.
the gun jumping into his hand and the blood going back in to Teddy's head, and then you're putting this all together. Like what? Like
Mm-hmm.
no movie, like no other movie, like really had done that, and
Yeah.
it grabs you right away.
Yeah, and it's with purpose too. Like it's it's to clue you in on the structure. Like this is what you can expect the rest of the movie. This like, and then the other cool thing with the sound design is all the sounds are actually like played forward. So like the gunshot and some of the other like sounds that you hear from the scene are not like the sounds don't happen in reverse. The sounds happen forward. So it creates this like disorienting effect. Like as you're watching it, you're like this kind of feels weird. Not just because it's in reverse, but the sound's playing forward.
Yep.
And yeah, and then like to have like the insert shots of like the glasses and the casing of the bullet, which by the way, the casing of the bullet, they didn't shoot that reverse mag. They actually shot that forward, and then like reversed it. Nolan, because like you can't really, it's so hard to capture like a bullet a bullet casing falling. And so Nolan like actually sat outside of the frame and like blew the bullet casing into the frame.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and then they that's how they got that like reverse shot is yeah, really like creative. Like I really want this shot of this bullet casing. How are we gonna make that happen? Oh, I'll just blow it into frame. Yeah, it really is incredible.
No, it's fantastic.
Yeah.
And I mean,
and then
like,
the casting is just incredible too, honestly. Like
truly.
Yeah. So did you know that Brad Pitt was originally like interested in and they like they were wanting to get him
I
Brad
didn't
Pitt.
until earlier this week. I listened to the Blank Check episode.
Yeah.
And then I heard about it there, and I was like, oh, like that. I love Brad Pitt. I've always been.
Yeah.
I mean, Brad Pitt, the actor, personally, that's you got to separate sometimes.
Right.
But I've always been a Brad Pitt fan. I think he's an incredible actor, along with being an extremely handsome movie star. But
Sure.
like, I think Guy Pearce, like because Brad Pitt is so handsome and charismatic, I don't know if he could sell the everyman, especially in 99 or 2000. Like that's Fight Club era. I mean, maybe, but he's just such a star.
He feels
I thought
too
he was incredible.
Powerful of a presence.
Yeah, like he does that sometimes very well. But I also think that because Guy Pearce is a little more thin and gangly, like he feels more vulnerable. Like Brad Pitt is this like super charismatic. He's broad. I don't buy him. Even I'm sure he would play the memory loss very well, but I feel like Guy Pearce's figure very much works for the vulnerability. Like Brad Pitt would have looked great shirtless with the tattoos, but I don't think he would have sold like rushingly, like putting on a suit that's too big for him, trying to figure out where he is. Like I think
that's one of the things Nolan talks about. Yeah, one of the things Nolan talks about is like Guy Pearce had this like incredible memory, not just like for like obviously like the lines and whatnot, but this really great memory for the movements, like where he was on in frame and the way he needed to move and express himself, which really comes through. Like, one of the things that I think Pierce does like incredibly well is that kind of like, kind of like what he's talking about that he realized Sammy Jenkins is doing, which is like acting familiar because you're not sure if you know someone or not. That kind of like, oh yeah, like, hey, Teddy, like
Yeah.
that sort of thing. Like, he does that so incredibly well. It's one of those things that like you really notice more on a rewatch is like
Oh yeah.
how he's acting like when he's running into someone again for him for the first time because he doesn't remember them. He's having to act like he's having to read them in one sense, but also like act like in a certain way, like because he's not sure if he knows them or not. He's not sure if they're pulling something over on them. So he's like reading them and then acting at the same time. Like, but you see all that in the way Pierce handles himself.
No, I wish that Guy Pearce was a bigger star in a way, but I mean, he's made some interesting choices, and sometimes some of the stuff he signs on to is a little whack, but
yeah,
he's got a lot of like wonderful, wonderful movies under his belt.
Yeah, I need to see more of him. I feel like he's one that I haven't seen a whole lot of. But yeah,
have you seen The Proposition?
I have not.
That just got a super nice 4K. I don't have it yet, but The Proposition is one that I always evangelize to folks. Wow, it is pretty low on his Letterboxd watched list, but Proposition is a masterpiece.
Okay. Yeah,
wow,
I'll have
it's
to note
streaming in a lot of places according to Letterboxd right now.
Great. Yeah, good to know. The Proposition with Guy Pearce. I'm assuming he's the lead in that.
Yes, he is.
Cool.
It's like an Australian Western. It's very much a Western, but it's set like in the Australian outback as it's getting civilized in the late 1800s.
Oh,
it's wonderful, very brutal, super duper brutal. But it's an incredible story.
Cool. Yeah. Yeah. I'll have to check that out. So yeah, Guy Pearce is great. Joey, you got Joey Pants.
Joey Pants.
Joe Pantoliano. It's better just to call him Joey Pants, so you don't have to get mixed up on the last name, which I'm assuming is Italian.
Yeah. No, Joey Pants is great.
Yeah, he is.
He's excellent as Teddy.
Yeah, I think it's Nolan's first. So like with Insomnia, you have these two huge like A-list, really like 3 A-list stars,
which is kind of crazy, yeah,
who come on with so much baggage, like not baggage like in a bad way, but just like people know them as certain types of actors, and somehow Nolan channels that, in like twists those things a little bit, and I think he does that really well here with Joey Pants, because like he's coming on, like people kind of have an idea of the sorts of characters he plays. It's usually like this weaselly villain kind of guy, and like he plays with that distrust that people have of the persona that he usually plays so well. It really, like, there's really great casting, and apparently Carrie Ann Moss actually suggested to bring him home. This was like right after The Matrix.
Yeah, right after The Matrix. He had both of them together again.
Yeah, and so
which
really
great run for both of them.
Yeah, which Carrie Ann Moss too, like she was so good in this movie, and plays like I feel like she shows like some range between this and The Matrix, because in The Matrix she's doing a lot of like, it's a lot of action and a lot of like the way she moves is like so important to that character, even more so than like the emotion. But here I feel like she plays the
really
emotion.
act.
Yeah, she's really acting, and she she does so incredible. Like that scene where she like tells him like I can say whatever I want and you won't
Yeah.
remember.
I feel
And then
like
she
for me
goes in the
that was
car
the
and stares at
standout.
him.
Oh, when she's staring at him
Whew.
as he is, you see later she like has hidden all the pens in her house, which
Yep.
is kind of funny that like his weakness is make sure you take away his pen so he can't write it
Yeah.
down because he's gonna forget it. But just the menace of her sitting in the car looking at him after she said all that horrible stuff, gotten him to hit her, knowing that she's just gonna walk in with a sob story.
Yeah.
And he's not
And
gonna
then
know any better.
acts as she's acting, which I always love when actors get to do that, is to like act while they're acting.
Yep.
To pull that off is like just an incredible skill. Because she really does like it could so easily, acting while you're acting, for lack of a better way to say that, is like could so easily come off as like campy or just like totally unbelievable, like take you out of a story. But so it really takes someone with some really great acting chops to pull that sort of thing off. Yeah, I almost wonder like how many actors like do improv, because it feels like that's something that you could really grow your skills in, doing like more improv sort of acting. Yeah.
Well, you said acting while acting.
Yeah.
That scene is so powerful and effective and sinister on its face, but then because of the storytelling structure and the way the scenes unfold, like it's even that much more powerful. Like if it happened in a linear way, it would be powerful, but you get to the punchline of you understand what she's doing to him. But before, like earlier in the viewing experience, you were on her side. You're like, oh, this other guy beat her up and Leonard's going to help her. And it's like, no. That's not what it is. And
Yeah.
man.
Yeah,
it's incredible.
It is incredible. And maybe we can like jump into that structure, like the way the reverse structure like works in this film. So like essentially like you're getting all the elements of a noir film, but you're just getting them in reverse. So like thinking about Natalie, Carrie-Anne Moss's character, it is a femme fatale character, but in reverse. So instead of going like seduction, manipulation, betrayal, you kind of get like betrayal, manipulation, seduction. Like it's kind of totally in reverse. And that's something that like this structure does for us. Like you still get that very familiar like sort of character, but just in a totally new and like really revelatory way. That's, I don't know, it's just like mind-boggling to watch and experience. Yeah.
Are you a big noir fan?
I have become much more into noir in the past, like I would say, few years. We were talking about Film Spotting a little before we started recording, and they did like a 40s noir marathon like a year or two ago, and I really enjoyed watching that. And I had watched some before that, and I feel like I've really watched a lot more since watching that. Probably from what it sounds like, probably not as much as you, but yeah, I would have to think about though like what my favorites are. Double Indemnity is way up there for sure.
Excellent movie.
Yeah,
a movie I loved when I watched it, and we did an episode last year on it, and it was years and years, and because it was so long, like watching it again fresh, I was like, oh my gosh, like I knew this was like a top tier movie. But watching the new Criterion release, I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is so good."
Yeah, I've enjoyed. I've for a long time, Hitchcock was a huge blind spot for me, and like last year, I watched Psycho, and for like the first time, and I've been kind of like progressively like watching more Hitchcock, and a lot of his older stuff A lot of his like 30s and 40s stuff is very noir.
Yeah,
Um,
he has some noir
and
vibes in there.
yeah, and so I've enjoyed some, like the 39 Steps is probably a lesser watched one, but really good. Um, Strangers on a Train,
Love it.
The Lady Vanishes. Those are just they're so fun. Um,
Yeah, I feel
yeah.
like when people, I mean, we're a little bit off topic now, but The Lady Vanishes is maybe my favorite Hitchcock.
Okay.
Like,
Yeah.
obviously, I know a lot of the other ones are incredible, but
Hmm.
like, just a fun like watch. That's all of the departments are
Hmm.
wonderful. It's extremely entertaining. It's thrilling. It's exciting.
Hmm.
Like, I haven't revisited it in a while, but
Yeah.
like the non-obvious ones, like that one's maybe my favorite.
Yeah. I was actually telling my wife she would enjoy. So my wife, like, she does not watch like anything that's stressful, or like she won't
My
watch
wife is
anything.
similar.
She won't
We
watch
do
anything that's going
thrillers
to stress her out.
occasionally. Yeah,
Yeah. So like she'll watch like she might watch like The Dark Knight or some darker stuff like that, stuff that she saw when she was younger. But
sure,
like today she's kind of like, I don't watch, like, I'll watch comedies, I'll watch rom-coms, I'll watch all that stuff, but don't ask me to watch anything stressful. And
sure.
I was actually telling her, I was like, I really actually think you would enjoy Strangers on a Train, because like it's, I guess it's kind of dark in a way, but it's very
It's
lightly
thrilling,
told.
but yeah,
Yeah,
it's a blast.
and it's very funny.
Yep.
Some good British humor. Like, yeah, yeah, yeah. We definitely got off topic there, but yeah.
But yeah, no, noir. Like this was mid or late 2001 when it came out
Hmm.
broadly, and maybe
Yeah.
even later when I picked it up. I was big into film noir at that time. Um because of the Max Payne Xbox games actually kind of
Okay.
got me into it. Like I read an article about all the different classic movies that inspired the game designers, and I watched all of them, and
Yeah.
I just became like head over heels for noir. Like that was the first like homework I gave myself. Where I'm like, I'm gonna watch all of the classic noir movies, and
Hmm.
I watched like a dozen or more of them in a short period of time, and it's it's so simple, but it became very close to my heart.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's very like, it is a very fun genre. Like, it's funny because usually they're like a little bit darker, and like literally they're darker.
Oh yeah, exactly.
And
Stylistically,
then
yeah, very stylish
stylistically,
movies.
yeah, but also like, yeah, they're highly stylized, like visually. And then like they're very like formulaic in a sense of like,
Yeah,
this is kind of the way generally the story is told, like we kind of talked about earlier. Um, but like always so like thrilling, like when they're done well, it's just like, it's like a ride. Like, I know what to expect visually. I know what to expect, like, kind of narratively, but it's still like
and more or
such an
less, you
enjoyable.
usually know the rules, like the
Yeah.
consequences. Like it's usually not going to end well if people decide to like come up with some sort of scheme to like
Mm-hmm.
do something illicit. It's probably not going to end well for them, but it's
Yeah.
thrilling almost every time when it's executed properly.
It's almost like, there's going to be some sort of twist or some sort of reveal, and I think it's part of it is like the anticipation of that makes is part of the enjoyment.
Yeah.
Um, which
Or
like,
just the shoot a drop in general of like the consequences, which back to Memento makes it so interesting that the choices that Leonard made, like usually like we're used to the femme fatale turning out to be bad. Like we usually can see that coming.
right.
That like, oh, that's the femme fatale. She's eventually going to be bad news. Or the friend who betrays you for whatever reason. But
Mm-hmm.
like usually the protagonist is reliable enough on his own. And it was kind of an interesting inversion of that here. Like, Leonard, like we learn eventually, like that Leonard is the one deciding to like deceive himself.
Right.
And that's, you don't usually see that. That's in the way that it's told with the storytelling device on when he's writing on all the Polaroids. It's pretty gripping stuff.
Yeah, it is. It is a total inversion. Like, I guess maybe not total, because like there's a sense in which like Teddy and Natalie are using him and playing typical like
totally
bad friend and femme fatale characters. Like they're
Teddy's
manipulating him.
Natalie's trying to get him to like take care of Dodd. Teddy's trying to get to 200K, but like they're not they're not Leonard's biggest problem.
Yeah, he's his own biggest problem. He's manipulating himself, which is really like incredible. And I think the structure like plays into that. Like Nolan even said, like, I think the quote that I had was, if you play this like forward, it's basically just like two people torturing some guy with a disability.
Have you ever watched that?
I haven't. No,
I think I don't think that I ever would. I was like, this is boring. I don't like it.
Yeah, I don't think I ever would watch it that way.
I think it was a Blu-ray or a DVD feature at one point.
Yeah,
and I was like,
I think it was a hidden feature.
Like, I don't want to watch this.
Yeah, I think I remember Nolan in an interview saying like that it was a hidden feature on a DVD release.
Yeah, I remember.
Which is
remember
fun.
Finding it, starting it, and going, "This is a more interesting idea." Like, because this isn't the movie. Like the whole like the inverted story that like meets in the middle, which he was doing like that Tenet crap from the beginning.
Yeah. Which even like you have the gun at the beginning going up into his hand in reverse, which is kind of like
was that a Tenet
call
thing?
Forward. Yeah, Tenet, you know, you have the bullet going back into the gun, and Tenet
yes,
was a big
I saw Tenet
thing.
once in the theater. I have it on digital, but I've not watched it again since.
Yeah, same actually.
Theater.
I saw it in theater and haven't seen it. So I'm looking forward to revisiting it. But yeah, definitely like it's funny how you can
like
see
the
elements.
blueprint for Nolan very much is in this movie, and I don't know where we are in this discussion. Like, I kind of think I would love for it to be topped, but like, I don't know if he ever did it better, frankly.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, so I'll say this isn't like my favorite Nolan. I have others that, like, you know, I like Interstellar more and Prestige more. Part of that might be like I came to this after seeing those later movies.
True. Yeah, this was a very formative movie for me.
Yeah.
When I was a young person and I saw it a ton of times.
Yeah. Yeah, so like the Prestige is so I remember seeing Batman Begins, and maybe The Dark Knight too, but the Prestige was the first movie that I was like, oh, this is a Christopher Nolan movie, when I was in college, and like the way that movie plays out and the twist, and like then like I remember like rewatching it again like really soon after I had seen it for the first time, and so that feeling that I had with like the Prestige is probably similar to like you with Memento, of like I felt like I needed to show people that movie, you know.
Yep. Well, and his movies really do lend themselves to that, which is nice.
Yeah.
Because it's also really nice to have somebody, whether I personally love the movies or not, it's nice to have somebody who is making movies that really cares about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
It is getting the general public excited. Like, I still haven't seen Oppenheimer yet because it's 3 hours long. And like
it's hard to get to the theater.
Yeah, with car rides and previews and everything, that's like a 4.5 hour endeavor. And
yeah,
I'll get it on digital and watch it. And I know that it won't be as exciting because my wife wants to see that. So I could maybe sneak away, but still, even if I stuck away, that's 3 hours at once, which is
right.
A harder sell now.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I've personally got 4 4-year-old and an 8-month-old in the house, and so just like leaving for like a 3-hour movie, plus getting there and back is just like, I don't know if it's gonna work out anytime soon.
I will be seeing Killers of the Flower Moon. That will be my long movie this year.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't wait for that one. I don't know. This structure is just like incredible. One of the things, like, you kind of talked about the time factor being a factor in this movie, and that structure, that reverse structure. Nolan kind of talks about like how all movies distort time, technically. The author that I shared, Tom Schoen, he talks about like in a class he showed people, I can't even remember what movie it was. Like he showed his class at a university movie, and like then he like the discussion they didn't know why they were watching it. Just like, we're watching this, and then so after the movie, he's like, okay, how much time passes in this movie? And like there was like they had like a 45-minute discussion in class about how much time had passed in this movie trying to figure it out. And it's because that's something that movies do that we just kind of like give ourselves over to.
Yeah, almost no movie happens in real time.
Right. And Nolan says one of the things that he loved about like making this movie is he's taking that just natural thing that comes to movie making and like putting purpose behind it. Like there's a
very Nolan idea.
Yeah, exactly. And it works so well. Like, you're kind of, once you pick up on like, okay, these are going in reverse, like you're in on that with him. It's not like he's hiding that idea from you. He's like putting it right in your face and saying there's a purpose behind this distortion of time that you're experiencing.
Well, and it doesn't, because you can't perfectly replicate memory loss to an audience, but the effect of watching this movie, kind of jigsawing it together, like you are being kept off balance in a type of way that the main character is, right? Like, Letty is always trying to figure things out, and you're always like, oh, like this kind of connects to that, which connects to that, like that fogginess. And I'm not quite sure exactly what's going on. Like, that really does put you in the character's shoes.
Yeah. And it often plays out very like with these like, like, oh, that's what's going on moments. But then it plays out comically sometimes too. Like one of the best little things is like, wait, where am I? Oh, maybe I'm chasing this guy. And he like starts to go toward him. And he's like, oh, he's chasing me.
Yeah, he gets shot at. And he goes, oh, no, he's chasing me.
Yeah.
That's so good.
Yeah, so good. And like funny, like makes you laugh like every time.
Nolan movies don't usually have humor in them.
Right, yeah.
You don't usually get a good laugh. Like that's a solid laugh.
That is a solid laugh. And then like I feel like Joey Pants brings a lot of like comedic energy with the way he plays that character too. And the way he kind of like jumps in so familiar with Lenny. Lenny,
Lenny. Yep. Like I had that stuck in my head, which is why like my complaint of like I remember the names of the people in Memento, and I maybe haven't watched that in like 8 or 10 years. And shoot, like, well, I guess there's mirth because of the gifts, the stuff from Interstellar, but I don't really remember the names of like any of the people in his other work.
Yeah, that's fair. One of the other things that I love about this movie especially is the editing. I feel like his early films, and I'm interested, so like a lot of the ones after this I've never really watched with this perspective that I'm watching these with for this series, and so I'm interested to see like, okay, how does this like progress as his career gets bigger. But like with these first 3 movies, the editing is so essential. And part of that is because like that's something that Nolan like learned how to make movies. Like that was part of him learning how to make movies was editing. I talked about in the overview episode that he found this old Steenbeck editing machine, and like learned to edit, like basically taught himself how to edit film on that machine. Which have you ever seen one of those things?
Yeah,
It's
but
a
I mean, we talked about this before. I am not technologically inclined.
yeah
I marvel at people who are, but yeah, that's
yeah.
not me.
When I look at that machine, I think like, wow, it's really impressive that someone makes movies using this thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, so like the editing is, and this actually got a nomination for editing, Oscar nomination.
Yeah, editing and screenplay, which again, I was
Yeah,
like, yes, like vindication, like my little movie, my little noir
right.
movie that
Which,
like this guy who I just discovered, Chris Nolan, like it got some Oscar nominations.
mm-hmm. Yeah, but the editing, man, the transition editing is so incredible. Which they, one of the cool, I guess, like a cool production fact is they didn't like, so when you have those transitions where you're like jumping from like this scene, the scene after to the scene before, it always, when you end the scene, it's the beginning of the scene that you watched before.
Well, there's usually like I noticed that particularly on this time, like there's usually some sort of like repetition, like a sound or like
mm-hmm.
the
Yep.
closing or opening of the door or the faucet or the shaking of keys or like
Mm-hmm.
there's some like thing that will put you in it, which like again, if you're Lenny, like those are the things that can even like kind of set him off and reset, like when Carrie Ann Moss like slams the car door before she comes
Right.
back inside.
Right. It resets them. And those audio like notes really do like play a big part. And that's all just editing. And then like you
Yep.
have so many like insert shots that like put you in his head, like his, like looking at the Polaroids or like the flashback memories. They all like, they're also very like purposeful, which one of the funny things about that is a lot of that, especially like the flashbacks of his wife, they shot all that footage and they really didn't know what they were going to do with it. And so like it really wasn't until they were putting the film together. So like that's probably the one part that was like less planned, like not really like precisely planned, was what are we going to do with this, like this footage of him and
Her being
the wife.
attacked.
Yeah, him and the wife. Um a lot of that ends up getting used at the end. But you have these like quick flashes of it all throughout the movie that are like very like, I think, well edited into the film. But yeah, I loved that. So like I'll transition into like more thematic stuff by asking this: what, when you think of Memento, what's like the thing that you think of like that rolls around in your head? Like Memento, this is what it had me thinking about after I watched it.
I mean, other than just how impressive of the story it was, like I mean, I probably wasn't thinking about this when it came out,
Mm-hmm.
but now kind of looking back on it, like thinking about like just the human desire to like have a story that you believe where like you're the good guy.
Yeah.
Right? Like Leonard went through some very hard stuff, but was coping in some pretty bad ways. And when confronted with it, when Teddy, I believe, and again, some of this is hard to decipher, but I think at the end, I believe Teddy's telling him the truth that
Yeah.
he helped him track down the guy who attacked his wife and who messed up his memory, and they killed him. And he couldn't remember, so Teddy's bringing him along, and they're taking the law into their own hands and taking care of scumbags and all that. But like Leonard is still trying to, like, he couldn't remember that. So he
Right.
needs a story to tell himself to go on. And I think it's an early chronologically line that Carrie Ann Moss said. It stuck out to me this time where she says like, it must be hard to like live your life just by some scribbles that you have on pieces of paper. And like a lot, like what do we motivate ourselves? Like what are the stories we tell ourselves kind of deal?
Right.
Like ultimately we all operate on a set of core beliefs, and like where do they really come from? Like those are questions worth asking.
Yeah, and we do like we all live by like a set of like presuppositions about like who we are, what the world is like, how we should interact with it. And then like
how do we know what we know?
right.
And how strict and stringent are we about our positions? Because you can get yourself into pretty bad positions going, this is it, like, and I won't even consider anything else. Like, and this is just kind of a fun story, but yeah, like those themes are definitely there if you want.
Yeah, and it's all there. It's really fun. I think the narration really like adds to that. Some of the questions that like he asks, I feel like are like, you know, really like great questions to think about. Just to like run away with and like, you know, talk about with your friends after you watch it, sort of thing. But like one of the standout ones is like when he's laying there and he's like, how am I supposed to heal if I can't feel time? Which raises the whole like time heals all wounds question.
He's literally stuck in like 15-20 minute increments of time. Like how can he exist?
Yeah, how can time heal his wound? And it really does raise the question, does time heal all wounds? Like, can time actually heal your grief or your loss? Or does it like just kind of like lessen your awareness of it over time? I don't know. I think about like how, so like for Leonard, his loss and his grief and his anger because of that is his identity, because he's stuck in that. His loss has defined him, but he can't like transform past that. Like he can't grow past that.
Well, no,
he
and
doesn't
that's
have
what
time.
Teddy saw and is taking advantage of, that
Right.
anger, that vengeance, and he goes, oh, like I can use him to kind of take out scumbags and help me earn a little bit of money.
Yeah, and
the same with Natalie too. Natalie saw that and she's like, well, this guy's angry, and if he's looking for somebody to punish, like why not punish somebody that will benefit me?
Yeah, and it's really interesting. I don't know, it just kind of makes me think like, so like when we, you know, who don't have anterograde amnesia experience like loss and grief, like what can we like take away from this idea? And it just makes me think about, okay, like when I have a big loss and am grieving over it, just asking the question like, does this loss actually ever leave me? Or am I able to like, I don't know, I guess like maybe it's the thing of like, let me not take for granted that I have the ability, because I don't have short-term memory loss, to be able to like grieve and let this loss and this grief become a part of me in a different way, than just being stuck in that grief and anger. You know, I guess like, I don't know, sometimes like films can do that. They can show you something that like you take for granted. It's that idea, I guess, like going back to Following, you know, there's that line where he says you take something away from someone to show them what they had. And I think Nolan does like to do that with his films. Like you're put in the perspective of Leonard, and he takes away your ability to to work through grief and loss from his,
Sure.
like Leonard's perspective, to show you like what you maybe take for granted.
Well, yeah, and I don't know exactly. I don't imagine that Chris Nolan was necessarily trying to get
Right.
to any of those. But I mean, I think
Right.
that one thing that you could, it's just like it is a healthy and good thing to lean into reality and to face the
Right.
truth. Like when those
Right.
things happen, it's good to lean into the truth rather than
Mhm.
try to retreat in a story you tell yourself to kind of avoid dealing with it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't mean to say like these were Nolan's intentions.
Oh, no, yeah.
But often when someone that is creative is like making art, like those ideas that are rattling around in their head do come out in the narrative or in the painting or whatever, where in ways that they might not even realize, which is something that is really cool about art is, messages can be in there, like totally in there, that the artist didn't even realize that they were putting into it.
And that's always fun.
Yeah.
I just had one of those videos pop up on social media recently. But yeah, no, that is always fun when you see artists in the promotion of their movies. You see an interviewer ask them a well-worded question. They're like, "Oh, like I guess that is what that's about."
Yeah. 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 It really is fun to when that happens, for sure. Another idea I think that is raised here is like just the reliability of our memory, and like
yeah.
how we use and interpret our memories, to like define ourselves, and to it's interesting. Leonard kind of talks about how like he doesn't go by his memory, he goes by facts. But
Yep.
the
Yeah, because his
reality,
background was the insurance investigator,
right,
which is
right, which
also a
is
very noir trope.
it is. It's a double indemnity. Is Walter Neff, I think, is a similar sort of occupation. I'm pretty sure. Could be I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure
No,
that's
he's an insurance guy.
right. Yeah. But I just think, I don't know. It's an interesting like idea that he has about himself, that you as the viewer kind of know, like, I don't know, dude, like your
Well,
facts
he
are
talks
pretty
all about
reliant on
exactly.
memory.
He's like,
Yeah.
this isn't about feeling; it's about facts, and it's like literally the climax of the movie is you purposefully tattooing wrong information onto your
Right.
body. So
Right. And
like,
which you don't know at that point, in the movie,
which
but
is a
even like,
subversion of you're like, oh, he's putting all these pieces together. He's got the guy's license plate. Oh, it's Joey Pants. But then that was a choice that he made. That wasn't
right.
the result of some sort of fruitful search and a revelation. That was just kind of a vengeful choice.
Right. Yeah, and I think that is like those elements of like the clues being put together do play sort of like a noir that goes forward in a normal structure. And it's like that reverse at the end. Like the way the movie ends changes the way you see the rest of the movie. Like once the reveal happens, like it totally changes everything else.
Well,
And
yeah, the
so
movie
like,
starts, you see right away. We talked about the scene going backwards.
mhm,
The first thing you see is Joey Pants getting his head blown off.
right.
And the last thing you find out is why. And
Right.
it's not what you thought it was.
Right. And like that really is like the main question you have the whole time. It's not like what happened to his wife and like who did it. It's more like, wait, why does he shoot this guy? Why is he killing this guy? But yeah, just like that idea of his memory, like him relying on facts, not memories, is it kind of like in hindsight is comical, because you're like, well, dude, like your facts are based on bad memory. Like on like your facts are based on like you relying on your handwriting, as if like someone couldn't have manipulated your memory to make you write
or
something
just told you a wrong
down.
thing that you wrote down. Like,
Right.
it is just fundamentally humorous and kind of tragic that
Yeah.
a guy with his condition is so adamant about facts.
Right. Yeah, and I think in a lot of ways that Leonard is like Nolan's most tragic character. You could probably argue the Hugh Jackman's in The Prestige is probably up there. I guess like Leo's
Could
Cobb
be. I don't
is
know. I haven't
sort of
thought
up
a
there,
whole lot
but
about that.
but yeah, Leonard really is a tragic character because like he's, I don't know, it's a weird thing because like part of it is he's imprisoned by his condition, but at the same time like he's still making choices. He still makes the choice that leads to him killing Teddy. Like he actually is in control of that in a way. He's manipulating himself and he's manipulating his condition to get revenge again on another guy.
Under Teddy's wing, and I mean, it depends on what story you believe about Leonard and Sammy and all that. But like, Leonard is kind of like out on his own, somehow sort of kind of functioning like he's being scammed by the guy at the hotel. And Teddy is clearly lying to him about some things, but also seems to be like telling him the truth and like trying to be his pal a little bit too.
Right. Yeah, it's there's always like a half truth in what Teddy's telling him. That's why it works. I think he doesn't like just outright lie to him. He's kind of telling him half truths. But yeah, I when I watched it this time, I think the Remember Sammy Jenkins tattoo on his right there on his hand stood out to me because I started to realize I don't think that Remember Sammy Jenkins is there to remind him of that story necessarily, but to remind him of the idea of like what he could become if he doesn't make purpose for himself. Because really, like when you see this, you have the black and white kind of narration with him on the phone that tells a lot of the Sammy Jenkins story, and like Sammy Jenkins really is like, he might as well be a vegetable. Like he doesn't do anything. He just sits in front of the TV and watches commercials. Right.
Where they're talking about the electrocuted shapes and all that. Like he couldn't make progress. And narratively, the tragedy is they're like, well, this isn't a physical ailment and insurance doesn't cover mental issues. So you're hosed.
Yeah.
Because they're like, well, this means technically you don't have a physical injury. Like, that's not what this is. This is a mental injury, and technically our policy doesn't have coverage for you, so you're out. You're out on your own,
which sucks. But yeah,
so maybe Guy Pearce was a little bit of a scumbag before this happened. He's kind of a little bit of a scumbag after it happened. Like Guy Pearce isn't really a good guy at all in this movie.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, like even he's kind of at one point reflecting on like, I just told his wife what I thought she maybe needed to hear. Like he wasn't actually like that concerned with that, like their livelihood. But I do think that Remember Sammy Jenkins tattoo is in a way like telling him like, hey, you don't want to become like a living vegetable like this guy. Like you want to, it's like a drive for him to, whatever it takes, have some sort of purpose that I'm living for.
Which is a double-edged sword. Like,
right.
What would you do to have a purpose?
Right. And it's like, is there a way for him to have a purpose that's not just revenge and not just like it's hard to say, it's, if you're just gonna how can you be a force for good with the condition you have? It's hard to say. I don't know, maybe someone more creative than me could come up with something, but
well, because I mean, even the emotional damage too, when you learn again, it is unclear of what is exactly true, but it seems to be true that Teddy and him tracked down the actual guy and they killed him, and that didn't leave a mark at all. He's like, I really thought that like getting the guy would be something you remember, and he even took a picture of it. And he goes,
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah, he's like pointing to where he was going to get the tattoo or whatever that said he got him or whatever.
Yeah,
it's hard to say. I don't know. There are
I feel
all
like his
those
tattoo
puzzles.
artists, like I know that typically tattoo artists can be looked down upon and maybe not on the up and up all the time in society, but like if you're getting tattoos where you're like, kill this guy, like
Yeah.
I feel like that might be a little bit of a red flag.
Yeah, John G raped and murdered your wife. The tattoo artist like, all right, man, sounds cool. Like,
And then you're like, I finally killed him. You're like, okay,
Yeah.
hold on now.
We did talk a little bit about like the rewatchability of this. I had written down in the notes this quote from Roger Ebert because I thought it was interesting. Ebert like almost kind of says like, oh, this is a one-time movie. Like it doesn't really
Yeah, that
work.
was kind of Ebert's ranking on this. And I get it.
Yeah.
Like, this is not one that I would rewatch a ton by myself, but I have a blast showing it to people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's probably true. It probably does play better when you're able to like show it to someone who hasn't seen it before.
I watched it a ton back when it came out by myself, but this is not one that now, like Nolan's movies for me are not like crazy rewatchable. A lot of the times because they're spectacle driven.
Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah, maybe I want to put them together a little bit, but like, I don't exactly. Like,
Sure.
when I saw Tenet, I was like, okay, all right. Like, maybe there's an article that'll help me understand this more, and I'm not a dummy, but it's just like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know about this.
I feel like though this one, like really maybe more than any of his others, like the puzzle aspect of it plays just as well with like rewatches almost because you're.
I think this is probably his most rewatchable one, other than maybe like one of the first two Batman movies.
Yeah, it's funny because there's so many like. I like to go back and read Roger Ebert's reviews of movies, like when I watch them.
Same.
Because he's just like he has such insight, and he he was one of the greats for a reason. But yeah, this was an instance where I was like, I don't know, like Ebert, like I feel like you're a little bit like, I mean, there is a
he's also a little
to it,
like I love Roger, but like he definitely. He wrote from the hip every time, and it's he didn't get them all right, but like he definitely is big plot and character, and this movie's much more about style and devices. And
right.
I'm surprised it got 3 stars.
Yeah, he did. He was positive on it, and he said like it was a really great like puzzle of a movie that was a thrill to watch, but he just kind of had the opinion that really like it's only like a one watch movie, like because after that it won't really be that great. And to me, like it's probably like a subjective thing. Like, do you enjoy like going back after a puzzle has been solved and seeing how you got there? Like if you don't, then like watch it once and be done with it. But to me, like I enjoy like digging into the details of the puzzle. And I feel like you would miss some really like so like this rewatch, for instance, like when I rewatched it this time, I actually like grew in sympathy for Carrie-Anne Moss's Natalie, because what I realized with this rewatch that I probably understood to a certain degree, but wasn't really like honed in on the first watch was when he rolls up, like he rolls up in her like boyfriend's car wearing her boyfriend's suit.
Yeah.
And like, and she even is like, you know, hey, and then she's like, oh, I thought you were someone else. And you know, you're realizing at that point you're far enough in where you realize like who she thought he was.
Yeah.
And that like that changes for me like her actions previously, because most femme fatale characters to a certain degree like don't have that sort of like sympathetic reasoning that she has for like the reason why she manipulates. And I don't know, I feel like that totally changes her character once that revelation happens of like, wait a second, she's seeing him, like she's putting the pieces together that this guy killed my boyfriend. And so like you really kind of have sympathy. Like you might not agree that she should then go
Sure.
forward with seducing and manipulating him, but like there's sympathy there. You understand like, oh, she actually has like actually a kind of understandable reason for doing what she's doing. You know, Teddy
Yeah.
may be less so. It's a less sympathetic version. He just wants the money that's in the trunk, for the most part. But like, yeah, I don't know. I feel like I would have. I just didn't pick up on that the first time, and this rewatch really like.
No, yeah, I definitely did not.
Yeah. Yeah, like, and then too, like all the subtle things, all the little things, like you realize like this suit totally doesn't fit him quite right, like because it's not his suit, and I don't think I even realized the first time I watched it that she was hiding all the pins, like we talked about earlier in that one scene.
Yeah.
I don't know that I picked up on that. Maybe I noticed, but like this time when I watched, I was like, I see exactly what's happening. Like, and you know, it's like his kryptonite, no pin.
I think that this is definitely a one that's worth rewatching, and maybe not like over and over and over, but maybe like every now and then. Like this is, I don't know. This is definitely not just something that's disposable. You can watch it once, but if you're a rewatcher like I am, and it sounds like you are, like this is definitely rewarding for the rewatcher. And it's one of the few Nolan movies that has a commentary track on the DVD or Blu-ray.
Yeah, that's true.
He doesn't usually do that.
I wasn't able to get that in before this, but yeah, I would imagine a lot of the stuff he says I was able to glean from the book, from the interviews. But yeah, I don't know what. So you said, I'm just kind of thinking about like the puzzles that we have, because like part of the thing is that Nolan says like the ambiguities of this movie are kind of like part of the point.
Sure.
And so like he tells the story actually of really early on, there was an interview where someone asked like what his take was on the movie, and he actually like shared it, what his take was, and then his brother like brought him aside and was like, hey, don't do that, like you're totally like destroying the point of like the experience of watching a movie. And he was like, oh yeah, you're right. And so like
that's very Crystal. Hey, be a person.
Yeah. And yeah, so it's funny, like now Chris Nolan is very like hush hush about like what his movies means. I guess he kind of learned from that experience.
Well, yeah, he'll talk about what's on the screen, but he will let you sit with it.
Right. And I don't know, this one does have like the ambiguities and the puzzles at the end are part of like the thrilling and fun experience. Like really, like you don't know. Like everyone kind of, I guess, has their opinion. Like, is Teddy telling the truth or is he not?
Exactly.
Like, you really don't know.
You're not certain if Teddy's telling the truth. You're not certain. I mean, I don't think so, but you're not certain. Is Lenny Sammy, or like
Right,
is
yeah.
there overlap, like the whole insulin thing? Like whose wife had
the
insulin?
insert shot of him like pinching his wife versus like giving her insulin shot.
Yeah.
They
And you
even
had like that Fight Club quick, like one frame of when you saw Sammy in the mental hospital and an orderly pass by, and you see Guy Pearson there for like a split second. Like,
yeah. He's like,
I think that was maybe more a little bit of an effect, but like it is meant to provoke the question rather than lead you to a crystal clear answer.
And it's just playing to a certain degree. Like it's fun to like he knows what he's doing. He knows he's like creating these like questions in your mind to leave you with, because that's something that like a filmmaker like Nolan likes to do. He likes to leave you with these questions, but then at the same time, like he is playing with memory. Like our memories are like that. They can be fuzzy. They can be like not quite right. And we can mix things up. And so like a lot of those shots there at the end, there's even the shot like of his wife, like laying on his chest, and he has I think it says, "I've done it," tattoo, like right there. Do you remember seeing that little insert?
I don't know if I did saw that.
Yeah,
tattoo.
It's there. Yeah, if you go back, right there at the end where like it's going through all that stuff that we're talking about.
Yeah.
There's a little insert. It's probably like 3-4 seconds long, where his wife is laying on him, like kind of like petting his chest, and he has the tattoo right there in that empty space that says, "I've done it." And so it's like this, I don't know, it's like this total like memory. I don't know. Like, I don't know what tattooing was like back then, if tattoo removal was big of a thing.
I mean, he clearly has a ton. Yeah. Like what is real is built into that as fun questions to ask.
Right. Yeah, and it's fun, and it's built into the character too, like a character that's kind of like unhinged from time and reality in a way. It becomes sort of a Nolan trope. His protagonist that has some sort of loss or grief and becomes like unhinged from time and space in a way. It becomes sort of like a thing that he does. Thinking about like The Prestige and Inception and Interstellar, like they all have that same similar trope with the protagonist that he's already playing with here with Leonard. And they're all different in the way that plays out, but there is that similarity. That I think is fun. I think it's a cool like thread to follow, the different ways that plays out through his filmography. Yeah, did you have any like final thoughts on this movie, or like final takeaways?
I mean, my final thought for the movie, really, like, I think Nolan works best with creative freedom but constraints. Like I kind of wrote on my letterbox, tongue in cheek, like, give him all the creative freedom, but like don't give him more than like $30 or $40 million. Like this, like give him more than 4, but like don't give him like $100 million and like all the leeway in the world. Like, give him some constraints. Like, I hope he can go backwards, because like Inception was crazy, and then you did Interstellar, and then you did Tenet, and then he created a nuclear bomb. Like, then it's like, at some point you're gonna have to dial it back. But also, Oppenheimer is the top grossing original R-rated movie of all time now. I think the Deadpool movies and Logan or Mad Max or something, like all the other ones were like IP sequels. Like Tenet is now the highest grossing original, even though it's a biopic, like R-rated movie. So sure, they'll give him all the money in the world for the next one, but I would love to see him return to do like something that was Memento or Insomnia or even Prestige sized again. I would really love that. So
yeah,
I would love to
it'll
see
either
a
take
constraint.
yeah, it'll either take like some intentionality on his part, or
Because he keeps making money, like he
right.
will, or like a terrible bomb.
Or that's what I was going
I
to
don't
say. Or
necessarily
he just
see
like
that.
bombs a couple of movies and then has to make his way back.
But I
Which,
think the Nolan cult is so strong, and he is very creative. Like,
yeah,
I think it would have to be a deliberate choice.
yeah. It. I kind of shared in the overview episode that he feels like the modern like Spielberg. It's kind of like his name is on the movie and people are just going to go see it, and that's just kind of the way it is. He's the modern director that gets butts in seats.
Yep, it's true.
And that was Spielberg. Spielberg maybe to a lesser degree now, but yeah, I mean,
I wish Nolan movies were as fun as Spielberg movies.
Yeah,
but yeah, no, he gets butts in seats, which
right.
is good. Which I'm pro cinema, and I'm glad that he's bringing people in, and he is very talented storyteller. Tenet was the first movie I saw in COVID. I was like, no, I'm gonna go see that. I'm not gonna miss that, even though I wasn't like amped out of my mind for it. I was like, I'm not gonna miss that.
Yeah, I was the same. I remember that was the first time I went back to the theater after the pandemic, when stuff started opening back up. And yeah, it's just like, oh, it's the new Christopher Nolan movie. We got to go.
Yeah, you got to
see what it's about. Yeah.
And if Oppenheimer wasn't 3 hours long, I would have seen that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I this is listeners probably know this by now, unless you're just jumping in because you like this movie, which fantastic. There's that way to listen to these. I always like to recommend like watching through, because that's kind of like the endeavor that I'm doing. It's like watching through a director's filmography to learn and glean from it in that way of watching it. But yeah, I like to do like a kind of final takeaway that really like probably the director, the filmmaker has no like, it's not on, like we talked about earlier, like this wasn't their intention at all, but it's just something that like, maybe isn't like even necessarily in the movie, but just got me thinking about, and I was just thinking about like who we are without our memories. Like we really like, our identity is kind of wrapped up in our memory of where we've been and what we've experienced. And when that's like, if that were to be taken away, like, does that take away like our identity? And really like where I ended up with that like thought line is just like bringing it back to how it plays out in the movie. Like a lot of the reason why, to me, like, Leonard is the way he is stuck in this state because the people that are around him like perpetuate his state. And it was just, it just like makes me like appreciate the fact that, building good like community around yourself is like such an important part of life. Like, yes, we're who we are, based on like where we've been, what we've made ourselves into, but like your community can be such a pivotal part of who you are and who you become. And yeah, just like surrounding ourselves with people that don't like push us into anger and push us into like, vengeance necessarily, or manipulate us to their own gain, but like surrounding yourself with people who push you toward love and who push you to grow. I just think that's, I don't know, I think it's something that is good to be reminded of every once in a while.
Oh, absolutely.
And so, yeah, that's just like, I I guess, sentimental in a sense takeaway that I had thinking about this movie. But yeah, I think I already know where you personally have this. I'm assuming you have this as your favorite Nolan movie. Am
Yeah,
I correct?
this is the top for me. Yep.
Yeah, yeah. Which I think I think more and more people are leaning in that direction.
Yeah, I
As
feel like the top three that like people have would be. I feel like it would be this, Dark Knight, or Interstellar, depending
right,
on what your interests are.
your flavor. Yeah, I know a lot of people have like Inception up there too, which is fair.
It's true. Yeah, my previous co-host Trevor, Inception. Yeah,
Mhm.
he made me do Inception and Interstellar on our show, and I like both of those movies. I think more after like really diving into them to cover them
Mhm.
for our show, but I also go unnecessarily complicated and
Yeah,
impressive spectacle, but also like, is it necessary? I don't know.
yeah, yeah. That's funny. So I guess like I guess I should say like, you're welcome for bringing you on and letting you talk about your favorite one.
Yeah,
You
was the
you're
one that
finally
was
getting
it
to
was open. Yeah, I don't know.
you
You
had
had
to
me
leave
talk
your
for
own
2 hours.
podcast to talk about your favorite Nolan
Yeah,
movie.
I'm probably not talking for 2 hours about Inception because it's like, dreams within dreams. That's
Yeah,
how far can that go? Okay, is the top spinning or not at the end? Who cares? I don't know. Like,
yeah,
it's for me. Yeah, I prefer characters. It doesn't have to be just plot, but
hmm
I think everything works in Memento.
yeah, yeah. I'm right there with you. I don't.
And it's
I saw
original.
you.
Like, I like The Dark Knight, but it's a comic book,
Yeah,
and it's also Heat.
yeah, that's
So
true.
Memento really has the originality aspect going for me.
Yeah, yeah. I think I have it like right there. So like I was kind of sharing like The Prestige and Interstellar are like two of my favorites. Dunkirk is up there too. I think it's in a sense a technical masterpiece.
I
Dunkirk.
completely agree. I think I
Um,
have it on number 2 on my list just because
yeah,
it's so impressive,
yeah. It's
but it's
just so
also not
tight.
one that I watch all the time either.
Yeah, yeah. It's not one that you never necessarily like. Oh, I've got to watch this again, but it's just so like tight and like
Yeah.
perfectly put together in a sense that
Yep.
just so yeah, Memento kind of sits like after those for me. I have it like right there with like The Dark Knight and um Inception. I think I would probably move it above The Dark Knight and Inception at this point, but we'll see if as I go through
Nice.
if I would move those back over it. It's hard to say. Ranking is I think ranking like movies is fun. But I'm totally aware that it's pretty meaningless.
Agreed.
But
For me,
it's fun.
the main one is that Dark Knight Rises is hard at the bottom.
That's fair. I think that's totally fair. I'm interested to rewatch that one. It's been a minute since I've seen it.
I feel like I should, but it's also almost 3 hours.
Yeah, they're long.
I should
Man.
give it another chance.
Yeah. But so up next is Insomnia. So we'll be getting to that next week. I actually recorded that already. So I'm kind of pulling a Nolan and
There you go.
switching up the timeline, the narrative structure of my podcasts by recording the podcast episodes out of order, true Nolan fashion. So I really enjoyed this conversation on Memento. Look forward to talking about Insomnia next week. We'll take a quick break here and come back with a very short movie news segment and a really fun movie draft. So we will see you in just a second. Hey everyone, thank you for joining us on the Establishing Shot today. We hope you're enjoying the episode so far, and we hope you'll stick around for the segments we have coming up after this quick break. But during this break, I wanted to tell you how you can get more involved with the Establishing Shot podcast. There are several ways you can do this. The main way you can do it is by going to establishingshotpod.com, our website where you can find all sorts of information like episodes with the show notes on there, information about our guests for each episode. You can find reviews there, and there's a page where you can actually leave a review on the website if you want to. You can see all the platforms where the podcast is available, like Apple, Spotify, all the major podcast platforms, and even a link to our YouTube page where you can see a video version of the podcast. So please go to the website. And the place I want to highlight there is our donate page, which has information about our Establishing Shot family. This is a way that you can subscribe to the podcast to support all the efforts and the stuff that goes into making this podcast good and making it better than it even is now. We have different tiers that you can subscribe to, starting at $5. And what this will do is you'll be able to support the podcast, help me make it better, and also at the same time, you'll get early and ad-free episodes. You'll get access to our Discord server where you can join in and just kind of talking about movies with a community that loves film. And so we would love to have you in there. And then the higher up in the tiers you go, the more you get. Even things like chats and video chats that we'll do every once in a while where we get to talk about in more detail stuff that we're talking about on the podcast. So I hope you'll subscribe to that. Choose a tier that fits your budget, and I would love for you to support the podcast in that way. And the last thing I wanted to talk about is where you can find us on social media. You can find me personally on Twitter at @TheEliPrice, and you can also follow me on Letterboxd. Letterboxd is kind of like a social media for movie reviews, so you can read my reviews there, and you can find me there at just Eli Price, no spaces or anything. So I'm on Twitter and Letterboxd. You can find the podcast on all the social platforms as well, such as Twitter at eShotPod, and then on Facebook and Instagram and TikTok at Establishing Shot Pod. So make sure to follow us so you don't miss anything. If you have any questions or comments about the episode or about the podcast, you can always email us at establishingshotpod@gmail.com. And the very last thing I want to do before you get back into the episode today is just ask you to please go to Spotify and Apple and leave some ratings and reviews. That really helps the visibility of the podcast and gets it in more people's podcast feeds. And so we hope you will do that for us, and we would greatly appreciate it. So I hope you enjoy the rest of the episode, and I will see you next time on the Establishing Shot podcast. Hey, welcome back. I'm here with Philip Marinello. And I really had a fun time talking about Memento. And we're going to jump into our movie news section. Not much to talk about here. This will be releasing in September. It's kind of like the dead period of of movies coming out. So, but something interesting that I noticed, there's been the recent re-release of Oldboy in theaters. Which
played around
is a
here
movie
recently.
that I haven't seen. It's been kind of on my list, but I've never seen it. And I probably won't be able to make it to a theater to see. But then I also...
Do you know about the movie? Is that one that's like unspoiled, or do you know all about it?
Yeah, it's unspoiled. I very vaguely know. So I probably will stay away from the talk about it in the review. I've seen some like Letterboxd interviews of people, and I'm like, I don't really want to hear what people are saying, sort of thing.
That's absolutely one to go into unspoiled if you're able.
Yeah. So I'm looking forward to see that eventually.
Like if you value your time, and you really want to watch the remake, okay, that's really one where you do not need to watch the remake.
Yeah. That's what I've heard. It usually, like, if something is below a 3.0 on Letterboxd, it's like, probably.
Oh shoot, it's a 2.1. Honestly,
Yeah.
kind of rightly so. I'd probably give it like a 2.5.
Yeah, it's 2.1 is pretty brutal to me, to be honest.
Yeah.
If
When
it's
the original's
2.1.
4.4.
Right. But yeah, which is crazy that it's a Spike Lee movie, the remake.
Yeah. I don't know if that was just the studio assigned it to him or what, but yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
It was something.
Yeah, but yeah, I don't know. I am looking forward to eventually catching up with Oldboy. It will not be in theaters because I can't even really make it, like I said, to make out to see Oppenheimer, so much less Oldboy. But I did notice too, coming up, I think right around the time this releases, either like that weekend or maybe the next weekend, the A24, I think, is working on re-releasing Stop Making Sense.
Yes.
Which, man, when I saw that, I have a group of friends here in Lafayette that we talk about movies, mostly, just texting back and forth. But I had texted that to them, and I was like, if this comes out here, that would be really fun to all go see it. Because I've seen it at home, and it was such. It's one of those movies that, like, at the end of the movie, it's a concert film. But
I haven't seen it yet. I was getting ready to watch it on streaming, but then they pulled it because they were remastering it for the 4K.
Yeah.
Like, literally, one of my movie friends recommended it for me. I got like assigned to watch it.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was like, oh, it's streaming on Canopy. And then it was pulled from Canopy because of the re-release.
Oh,
so
man.
I still have yet to see it.
Yeah, it's a really, really fun experience. It's one of those that, like, when I saw they were re-releasing it in theaters, I was like, that would be really fun to experience in theaters. Just because it's a concert film, but it's not like a typical, like, there's a lot of, like, purpose behind the way it was, like, filmed, very obviously. And it's not just, you're not just watching a concert. You're like watching a performance, which is really fun. And it's one of those movies that, like, ends and I was just, like, smiling when it ended because it was so fun. It's such a good time.
Looks fantastic.
Yeah, so I re-releasing movies is just something that I think needs to happen more. I think I'm on record as saying that Disney should just re-release the originals instead of doing live action remakes.
Yeah, I'd love to see a lot of those in the theater again.
Yeah, I didn't see a lot of those old movies in theaters. I was born in the middle of the revival,
like the classic era.
Yeah.
Pre-Lion King, like, I didn't see Aladdin or Little Mermaid in theaters. I think Lion King was probably my first theatrical one.
Yeah. So I mean, it's like, man, I would love to go see Pinocchio in theaters, or some of those old. I would go watch Fantasia in theaters. I think that would be fun.
Love to see in a theater.
Yeah. So I don't know. I feel like maybe this is like the beginning of a trend. I don't know. Like, my local theater has I think it's called, like, flashback cinema. So, like,
nice.
I was able to see The Godfather in theaters because they had it. They played it. Yeah, so you get some with theaters doing stuff like that. I know a lot of theaters do similar things. But yeah, there's not like a big media push behind it. With these two, there's been like this huge media push of this is re-releasing in theaters.
A24 took over the release, I guess, with the new 4K, and it's getting a lot of buzz, which is cool.
Yeah, it is very cool, and I would love to see that become a trend. Like maybe A24 will take it upon themselves to do this with more films. If this does well, I hope it does. But yeah, I don't know. I just think it's it's an experience to see something on a big screen that you just don't get, at home. That, there's a lot of movies that it's like, well, just watch it at home.
Sure.
But yeah, there's so many movies that would just be so fun and such a cool experience to see on the big screen. I felt that way about when I was able to see The Godfather on the big screen, because it came out, a couple of decades before I was born. That, a re-release in theaters is the only way I would have been able to see it
that I
that
didn't
way.
get to see that. I get to see like one of my local theaters here. They're always playing old stuff, but when I was bummed I didn't get to see The Godfather. I still haven't seen that in the theater yet.
Yeah. It's a cool experience. I don't really have anything that interesting to say about it other than, man, I really hope this becomes like a thing that happens more often. Not just like theaters playing old movies, but there being, big media pushes behind it to kind of like grow.
You would think they would do that more because like they own it already. How much money would they have to put out to be like, oh, like, I mean, James Cameron has done it a ton. Like, that's how he keeps up at his box office. I feel like every 5 years, Titanic comes back and millions of people go see it because it's a super great theatrical experience.
Yeah, and now he gets to keep putting Avatar back out as he's releasing the next, like, 10 Avatar movies.
I loved seeing the first one in the theater.
Yeah,
then
it was
wrote
fun.
it off. And then I wrote it off. And then the second one came out, and we got press screenings for the podcast. And I was like, man, this is a freaking blast. I forgot, like, it's so good. And I'm like, I'm in, whatever. I don't care. Like, if he wants to make 4 more, I'd wish he'd make other movies. But, like, he's telling the stories he wants to tell in Pandora. So whatever.
Yeah.
Like, I'll take it.
My favorite parts of that, of Way of Water, were just, like, the visual aspects. Like, the whole... There's that whole middle section where they're just, like, exploring the
underwater,
like the sea.
Good.
It's fun.
So good.
I didn't like a lot of the rest of the movie, but that part was like so fun.
I haven't rewatched it yet. I would like to, but because it's also very long. I had a blast in the theater. It was so immersive, and like the man knows storytelling. Anyway, all that to say, I agree. I would love to see more studio pushes on just good movies.
Yeah.
Make new movies. I want new movies to be made, but yeah, it would be great to see the classics as well.
For sure. With that said, I think we are ready to jump into our movie draft segment. I thought it would be a fun category to draft from alongside Memento. To think about movies that deal with like memory loss and memory manipulation. That's kind of what we're going to draft from. So any movie that deals with memory loss, memory manipulation, do with that what you will. I didn't really give any stipulations to you, Philip, other than that. So I kind of left it up to you to decide what movies fit into that category.
Are we going back? So what's the goal? Are we trying? I've done this before and I listen sometimes. Are we just trying to make our favorite or the best? Like,
I always end up doing a little bit of both.
Okay.
Because I do put this up for vote. It's kind of
I like it.
People like voting on who drafted the best set of movies.
Okay. Perfect.
And but I always end up like my heart won't let me like go away from some of my favorites. And so it's helped me in some drafts and hurt me in others, where like I went with my heart and everyone was like, no, we like this. We like the guy that picked the more popular movies.
Sure.
Like, okay, well, at least maybe now you've heard of this movie.
I'll see if I can do a little bit of both. Okay, so who's going first? We're going back and forth?
Yeah, we'll go back and forth. I always give my first time guest first pick. Because that's what I do. It's not because I'm generous.
Well, I've got a list of a few here. I don't have 10, so if we all pick the same ones, I might need to get a little bit creative here at the end.
Sounds good.
I mean,
Let's do
after
it.
talking about this, man, I'll say Memento if that's okay.
I usually
It's
take the movie of
okay. We'll take
discussion
it
off
out.
the
Okay,
board.
then I will go. I mean, it's heart and it's um a canon great. We've already brought it up, and that's Blade Runner.
Hmm.
It's one of my top 3 favorite movies of all time, and it's endlessly rewatchable, and it's all about identity and memories
Yeah.
and what it is to be human. So I'll say Blade Runner.
Yeah. Yeah. And it is interesting. So, like, I think probably most people would be like, oh, Blade Runner's like about memory loss and manipulation. And yeah, there's a sense in which, like, he doesn't know if his memories are real or not, sort of thing. And
Well, yeah,
that's,
and the people he's hunting down to a degree don't know that they're androids either because they have
right.
been implanted with memories,
Right. Yeah.
not necessarily against their will, but outside of their will.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And so yeah, that's one that I didn't even have on my list because it just wasn't like on my radar of thinking of it in that way, but very much.
That's the first one that popped into my mind because
That's
seems
funny.
like you're talking about memories. Like that's deeply.
Yeah, and obviously,
So there you go. My number 1, not even on your list. I didn't even
obviously
take any
popped into Nolan's head too, because yeah, yeah. So yeah, Blade Runner, first pick. I'm gonna go with It's tough. So I have a few that would be more heart picks, and this one is. I would say this one is less of a heart pick, but a movie that I really, really, really like that is very good, and probably a more popular one. So maybe similar to Blade Runner, like a heart and popular pick, and that's Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind.
Nice.
Great, probably one of the best uses of Jim Carrey that we got in his career, I would say. But yeah, I don't really know. It's one of those movies that, like, since it's not the topic of discussion, I don't really want to spoil it. I think it's better experienced, not really knowing what you're getting into going in. It is very much a unique experience of a movie.
It's very much part of the elevator pitch if you just read the synopsis or watch the trailer. But yeah, no, that's a very good movie. That was definitely on my list.
Yeah, it's kind of in the title too, I guess, a little bit.
Okay, that's good. I mean, I'll do another populist one because I have a few others here as well. But wonderful movie. It's broadly, this is probably one of the ones that kind of got memory loss and amnesia kind of back on everybody's mind. I'll go with The Bourne Identity. That's I don't rewatch it often, but whenever I do, I'm like, no, that's really good. But I'm like, is that not as good as I remember? I've only watched it like 3 or 4 times, but
yeah,
it's every time I've revisited it, it's been satisfying.
Yeah, it is one of those movies. I think it's partly because it's such an action movie, and we're always like questionable of like, was that action movie really that good? And you were watching, you're like, yeah, it was pretty good. I feel like the Mission Impossible movies are similar. It's like, was it really that good? And it's like, oh yeah.
I haven't revisited all of them, but with the new one, I've revisited a number of them, and they're all good. Even 2, which is strange, is pretty good.
Yeah, it's enjoyable at the very least. Yeah, I'll that was one that was definitely on my list. This one is going to be less popular. I actually think I picked it several episodes ago, and we did a desert movie draft for the Asteroid City episode.
Okay.
And I'm going to go with a movie that I love. It's like a 5-star movie for me, and that's Paris, Texas. The Wim Wenders film,
that's
which is
all-timer for me. I guess that is.
Yeah. I mean, the guy walks out of the desert not knowing who he is, and like his brother finds him, and it's him kind of like, rediscovering who he is, why he left his family. I mean, it's just a phenomenal movie.
Devastating final 20 minutes.
Yes, absolutely.
That was a Criterion Collection introduction for me. I just picked it up because I thought the cover was striking, and
yeah,
that's an all-timer for me as well.
yeah. Sweet. Yeah, so there's one that you didn't have on yours.
Yeah, so
But should have.
yeah, dude, like, I know that popular. I'll go. So this is one that is having a bit of a resurgence now. I've seen a number of people talk about it, and I think I eventually was finally sold on checking it out due to a Letterboxd top 4 show. Somebody had it in their top 4. Talked about it for about 15, 20 minutes or so. That's Strange Days. I think from the late 90s. Catherine Bigelow, have you seen that one?
I haven't. But
so that is,
it seems like a Bigelow that I would enjoy.
So yeah, I don't know why it didn't hit when it came out or kind of since then. Like, it's absolutely having a resurgence now. But it is about briefly, so it's about a guy who basically, like, real life VR, you can like plug in and experience memories, or like you can have like not VR, but like you put nodes on your head and like it stimulates your nervous system. So like there is extreme sports, there's violence, there's sex, there's like whatever you want, you can like plug into this thing and experience somebody's real memory. And it's it's a thriller, cop, romance, like there's a lot of different things going on.
Yeah. I would imagine
it's
there's
thrilling and fantastic.
Yeah.
And like there's a lot of social stuff too, like with the police and all that as well. Like it's a wonderful movie that I'm shocked, especially being in the film loving world. Up until the last year or so, I had heard nobody talk about this, but people are talking about it again, and I checked it out recently, earlier this year, and it's incredible.
Yeah. I think the only reason that it was familiar is because I heard someone talking about Catherine Bigelow in a podcast recently, and was like, "Oh yeah, what all films has Catherine Bigelow made?" And so really just like it's the title. Like I don't really know anything about it.
No, it's phenomenal. But yeah, some extreme
Ralph
content.
Fiennes. I just was looking at it. Ralph Fiennes is in it, which is that's a pull in and of itself.
Yeah, no, I'm sure that in the next couple years, I don't know about Criterion or Arrow, somebody's going to put out a loaded Blu-ray or 4K of it, and I think it'll come back into the canon and be a widely recognized classic.
Yeah. That's cool. I'm going to have to try to check that out. See if it's streaming somewhere. Yeah, my next pick is, I'm not sure if it's like a popular pick. It's definitely like a well-respected and regarded like critical pick. But I'm going to go with David Lynch's Mulholland Drive.
Nice. That was one of my stretch picks here, which we have a re-release coming to my local theater here in a couple weeks that I'm hoping to catch.
Yeah. Just, it's one of those movies that's like, I mean, this is David Lynch's MO, but it's just that waking dream sort of movie where like the movie ends and you don't know what in the world you just experienced, but you experienced something.
Yep.
And
masterpiece.
Yeah, it's a great movie. Obviously, like one of the main characters doesn't know who she is, so there you have the memory loss factor there. But like that's like, funny enough, that's like the least mysterious thing going on in the movie is the memory loss, which doesn't, I guess like makes sense when you realize it's a David Lynch movie. But yeah, just like an incredible piece of filmmaking, and like yeah, I don't really have much to say on it that people haven't already said. So, but yeah,
No,
Mulholland
it's
Drive.
a very rich text for sure.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, well, I will go with another one that is both popular, and because of its popularity, I think it's almost underrated actually. But a couple years ago, I watched it again, and I'd say 50 First Dates is a blast.
Yes, that
I
was
don't
on my
really,
list.
I don't like. When I was younger, I liked Adam Sandler a lot more. Now I respect him. I'm very happy that he gets to make whatever movies he wants. But
Yeah.
I really think that 50 First Dates is maybe his one of his best because it's funny, it's juvenile, it's silly, but it is also
Mhm.
very heartfelt in a way that I feel like 50 First Dates and Click are the two that really stand out to me as being like mature, immature movies.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Um,
And Sorry About Your Brain,
it's
has been in my lexicon ever since it came out. Like my wife and I and my friends,
forgot about
like
that line.
that is something that I say all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. I totally forgot that, that was a line. It's been a long time since I've seen it, but I remember when the last time I did watch it, I was like, that's a fun movie. And it is heartfelt. There's a genuine like care for the characters, I think, in that movie that you don't necessarily get in a rom-com. But yeah, it's definitely there. I think it's a really fun movie, and yeah, it probably is a little bit underrated,
Because it's
or
Adam
underappreciated.
Sandler.
Yeah, yeah. I'm trying to figure out where I want to go with my next pick, but
I don't imagine my final pick will be taking one from you. We'll see.
yeah, I have. So I have. It's one of those things where like I have several more that I want to take, but I can only fit in so many. We'll have to do some honorable mentions for sure.
Oh, sure.
Um, but yeah, I'll probably go. So this is definitely going to be like a popular pick. Like, let's grab some votes with this one.
Sure.
But it's also, to be fair, one of my favorite. I think probably my top 2 or 3 MCU movies, and that's Captain America: Winter Soldier. So obviously,
okay.
Bucky Barnes is the main, one of the main antagonists, and his whole thing is he kind of doesn't remember who he is, has been being used.
There you go.
By Hydra. And yeah, I just think this is a really fun action movie thriller kind of. It's I don't know. It's one of my favorite MCU movies.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm pretty low on a lot of MCU movies that people love. Like I'm pretty low on Infinity War, and I'm very like middling on Endgame, and those are like
higher on Endgame than Infinity War, huh?
A tiny bit.
Interesting.
I appreciated. It's kind of a mixed feeling because I appreciate how it starts. I feel like it starts with settling into some grief and all that stuff, and then like goes off the walls.
Those last 2 movies, though, it's kind of impossible, like because they were the culmination of like 22 or 23 movies. Like they almost weren't even movies; they were like an event, so they're kind of hard to quantify even.
Yeah, I just had so much like MCU fatigue by that point. I was just like,
That was the peak for me. Since Endgame,
yeah,
it's been rough. But yeah,
that's fair. But yeah, this one, 2014. So I mean, you're like what? 2008 was Iron Man. So yeah, this really was like peak MCU. And I probably have watched this a couple of times since it came out. And every time I remember watching it, I'm just like, man, that's just a really fun, thrilling movie. funny enough, I don't really think that the first Captain America is all that great, but
Yeah,
this
I
one
like
I
it
love
fine, but yeah, no, Winter Soldier is definitely a solid pick.
for sure. That way I can just go with my heart for the last pick.
Nice.
What's your last pick going to be?
So this is very much the heart. I think that over the years, I mean, I think already it's recognized as a classic, but I don't think it has broken out large yet. But for my final one, this was, I think, the first new movie I watched this year that I gave 5 stars to. It came out last year as Kogonada's After Yang.
Yes.
It's a near future, very kind of lo-fi, sci-fi. I described it as Blade Runner by way of Terrence Malick. It's this family has an android sibling for their daughter whose battery has died, and they're trying to find a way to fix him and revive him. And it's all about unlocking the world and his memories and seeing what he valued and kind of how he processed the world and how an artificially created being kind of processed the beauty and the meaning of our world. And it's incredible.
Yeah. It was one of my favorite movies, like one of my favorite 2022 releases.
Yeah. It's up there high for me. I didn't get to see it in theaters. I'm so upset.
Yeah, I didn't either. Man, it's an incredible movie. It's one of those that like is like takes its time, very slow. It's kind of like anti a lot of like AI sci-fi movies in a lot of ways.
Very serene and slow paced, very
but man, like brought me to tears at one point. And I didn't even think about it in the terms of this draft, or else I would have had it on my list for sure. But yeah, I mean, he's looking into the memories that were kind of like hidden from his android. Didn't even think about that, but man, if you haven't seen either of Kogonada's films, I highly recommend After Yang and Columbus.
One of them, I think we might lean towards Columbus. One of those movies will be a on the substantive cinema in the near future here.
Yeah. That would be either of those would be fantastic to cover, for sure. My last pick, I don't get the chance very often to draft documentaries in these drafts. So I'm going to take my opportunity and I'm going to go with a movie called Dick Johnson is Dead.
Very nice.
Yeah. Have you seen it?
I'm not. I know the movie. I haven't seen it yet.
Yeah. So it's by a documentary filmmaker, Kirsten Johnson. She has a movie called Camera Person. It deals with I haven't seen Camera Person, so I can't really speak that much to it. But Dick Johnson is Dead is kind of she kind of like filmed her experience of her father losing his memories as he gets his Alzheimer's progresses. And it's just this, I don't know. It's a very like incredibly like poignant look at personhood, like what makes someone who they are and how memories play into that. And, you know, how you deal with like as you have someone that's close to you, you know, begin to lose their memories and lose who they are because of that. How you slowly feel like you're losing them before they're gone. And all that sounds very like incredibly sad, which parts of it are very incredibly moving, but also the way she does it is she basically, like, her dad agrees to work on her with filming these different ways that he might potentially die, which turned out to be extremely comical and funny. And like her dad is a great sport and like you can tell he's kind of having fun with it too.
Sure.
Like they filmed this reenactment of him like being like impaled by by something on the street that, or something like falls on him, like an air conditioner from a high rise apartment or something like that. So it's like, it's this really fun mix of like comedy and like dramatic, I guess like it's a documentary, so like the real experience of losing someone as they lose their memory. Highly recommend it. It's on Netflix right now. So it's a 90-minute movie, so not that long, and just like both like a really fun movie and an incredibly moving movie. I think so. Yeah, Dick Johnson is Dead. That's my heart pick. It's not going to get me any votes, but now people will maybe go try to watch it.
No, that's one that I know I will like, and it will wreck me. I just haven't.
Yeah.
You only have so much time to get through your watch list.
Right. Yeah, I think we're good. I think there's definitely some, I have honorable mentions.
Yep.
One of them that there's a couple that I caught up with recently, knowing that I was going to do this draft. One was The Manchurian Candidate.
Okay. The original or the remake?
I'm assuming it's the original. It's the 62 version. I didn't even know there was a remake, to be honest.
Yeah, Denzel Washington was in the remake.
That's true. Yeah, I'm looking at it right now. It's Jonathan Demme. I didn't even realize that.
It was okay. The original is much better.
Yeah, the original was really like there's these dream sequences where like the actor, like they're remembering what happened in their dream, but they were like they were brainwashed, and so like it's like jumping back and forth between old ladies and they're like Russian and Chinese people who are brainwashing them, and it's actually like really playful and like creative way to like view that like messed up memory after you've been brainwashed. Yeah, that it was a fun movie. I probably like didn't like it quite as much as it seems like most people have.
It's very good.
Yeah, it is very good. It's undeniable that it's a well-made movie.
So that's one that I was telling you. My dad showed me that when I was a kid, and now it's in the Criterion collection.
Yeah. I would probably wait a while to show this to my 4-year-old, but yeah.
Yep. Saw it when I was a bit older.
Yeah. Another one that I caught up with recently, like I said, I've been kind of on a slowly watching Hitchcock when I can, and this was a good chance to catch up with Spellbound, which was really good. It's Ingrid Bergman and Gregory Peck, so you got some great powerhouse acting there, and I think it gets a little too muddled up in interest in psychoanalysis, which is funny because it's like Christopher Nolan in that way. Like that's one of the critiques of Nolan sometimes, is that he gets too caught up in his ideas, that like all of the dialogue revolves around these ideas and makes the characters less interesting. And I think that Spellbound has a little bit of that, but still a really fun, interesting movie, and very much an old Hitchcock movie. I think it's 1945. But yeah, another one that's like you could almost put any like Tarkovsky movie in here because they're all like playing with memory in some way. I would have loved to draft Solaris, but I drafted it.
Yeah, Solaris was on my. Actually, I like the Tarkovsky and the Soderbergh Solaris.
Okay,
maybe I could have gone
Soderbergh
for the pick, but yeah, no, those are both on my Solaris on my. I was like, I probably won't pick these, but they were on my list.
Yeah, it's one of. I've loved all the Tarkovsky I've seen, and that's probably one of the higher rated movies on my list that I didn't pick. But I don't want to spoil the draft for next week, so I won't. I won't talk any more about that. But yeah, there's some others on here. I mean, you got Finding Nemo and Finding Dory.
I considered Finding Nemo. I was like, that would be a popular pick.
Right.
But Finding Nemo wasn't enough about the memory, and I like Finding Dory far less. So.
Yeah, I felt exactly the same. I was like, well, it's not that important part of the movie. And yeah, I didn't really care a whole lot for Finding Dory. Yeah, Moon. Have you seen Moon?
Yeah, Sam Rockwell.
Yeah, that's in a way.
Is that a memory? I don't remember.
In a similar way that like a movie like Blade Runner is, in the sense that like I don't want to spoil it.
He's losing his mind?
No.
I saw it once or twice, and I really liked it, but I don't remember a lot of the specifics.
Maybe I'll tell you as soon as we wrap up, because I don't want to, because it would be a huge spoiler to talk about how
I remember
how you
really liking Moon.
It's a bit of a stretch to put it in the memory thing, but I think it fits. Yeah. If you want to go comedy, you have The Hangover.
Okay, sure.
Yeah,
that would be a huge populist pick. Yeah.
Yep. It's been picked it was picked in a draft not long ago, which so I was like, I'll just leave that on the board.
I didn't even consider
I picked
that.
Paris, Texas again, but that was like I said, just one of a huge favorite for me. So yeah. Well, did you have any that were left on your list?
Yeah,
that we didn't go with?
I mean, one of the more like obvious ones that came to mind. I don't love it as much as many do, but Verhoeven's Total Recall is a classic.
Yeah, I haven't seen it. So
I like it. I respect it probably more than I like it, but like it's an undeniable, very entertaining, very well made movie.
Mm-hmm.
A Dark City was another one I thought about, but I'm sure it's not going to win any votes. It's
haven't seen that. It
starts with a guy who loses his memory. It's kind of another future tech noir type story. This one, it's not cheating, but the idea of like in the Memento, like the stories we tell, like can maybe change or like the people's perceptions have become true. I considered stretching it for The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance. That
that would
I don't know
be
if
a
you've
really
seen
big
that.
Stretch.
That's a bit of it, but like the whole that's how the whole movie turns on that. And then I'm a big Scorsese guy. I considered Shutter Island as well.
Yeah,
I feel
considered
like
Shutter Island too.
Leo is a big draw, and I feel like an under-respected movie. Because Scorsese's high are so high, like I feel like a lot of people are like, this is like just sort of genre churn, and I think people really misunderstand Shutter Island. I don't think the ending is a twist. I think what many people refer to as the twist in Shutter Island is very clear. And I think the real thing that the movie hinges on is the decision that the character makes when he has the realization that any discerning audience member will have nearly immediately, and the choice he makes when he realizes what's going on. I mean, it's nowhere near the top of Scorsese's body of work, but I think it's an excellent film that doesn't get quite enough respect.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think surprisingly on Letterboxd it has a 4.1, which I did not expect.
Yeah, all right. What's how many people have logged that?
I mean, you have 368,000 4-star reviews,
guys. That's what's up. Okay,
so Letterboxd comes through sometimes.
That's respectable.
sometimes it's better. It's more hopeful to go on Letterboxd and look at ratings
I
than it is to
completely
look
agree.
at user ratings on IMDb.
No, don't look at IMDb or the tomato. Like Letterboxd has really replaced everything for me.
Yeah.
Like the people who love movies are on Letterboxd.
Right.
There's some people who like to be trolls or whatever, but it's Letterboxd is absolutely my go-to place for consensus.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, the Letterboxd
4.1.
community.
That's kind of
4.1.
shocking.
I was surprised too. I was expecting like 3.8.
I was like,
it feels like a
happy.
3.8.
I would be happy if it was above 3.5 at Letterboxd.
Yeah, that is very surprising.
It's great. That's one of the few movies that I have literally just watched back to back when I first watched it.
Yeah, I probably did too, because I think I saw it when I was in college. Yeah, I think it was in it was one of those that like me and my roommate went to Walmart and it was in like the $5 bin. And we were
nice.
like, oh, let's watch this. Oh man. Yeah, that's a great one. Scorsese's one of my favorite directors. So.
Those are my. I know Liberty Valance was a bit of a stretch, but those are my honorable
Liberty Valance
mentions.
is a fantastic movie.
I was this close to getting Leonard Maltin to come on my show to talk about Liberty Valance during COVID, but that did not work out.
Yeah, I caught up with that not that long ago. It was actually the Film Spotting, which we talked about. Their podcast does like the March Madness style bracket tournament, and it was like best of the 60s.
Nice.
And that was one. That was one that I hadn't seen, and so I was like,
it's a masterpiece.
Yeah, it's
very
fantastic.
Very relevant.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
in the age of
it holds up.
Fake news and all that.
Yep. Yeah, fake news, and then like just like the morality of like how you choose to go about issuing justice, I think is still relevant.
Yep. The public's desire for the strong man and all that.
Right.
Like it's super relevant movie.
Oh yeah. Yeah, so I would say a definite stretch for the memory loss and manipulation draft, but I'm glad we got to recommend it here at the end of the show. Yeah, I guess at this point we can kind of well, let me read out. I always sometimes I forget. Let me read out our final draft picks, and then we'll close out with some recommendations of the week. So Philip ended up with Blade Runner, The Bourne Identity, Strange Days, 50 First Dates, and After Yang. And I ended up with Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, Paris, Texas, Mulholland Drive, Captain America, The Winter Soldier, and Dick Johnson is Dead. So I think we did really well. I think we both ended up with really good lists there.
So who votes on these polls?
So when the Monday after it releases, I'll post the poll. I do it in an Instagram story and on the Facebook page.
All right.
So whenever that happens, make sure you. I've gotten like destroyed before because one of my guests like recruited her army of friends to vote for her, and I was like, man, she really outdid me with with getting people to vote for her. So if you want to recruit an army of people to vote for my friends are too objective. They're like, hey, sorry man, I like the other person's list more. So yeah, we'll see. But yeah, it'll go up. So I always post them. I guess I've never really plugged that on the show before, but on I usually try to post it on all three of Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. So on Twitter and Facebook, obviously, it's just like a post with a poll. And then on Instagram, it's usually in the story, and it'll run for, 24 hours.
Sure.
Monday around lunch to Tuesday around lunch. So
nice.
Yeah, if you never vote on those, like be looking for that the Monday after it releases, and go vote for who you think had the best draft. I always have a good time with it. I've won a lot of them. I've lost some. Yeah, it's fun. People enjoy voting on
I
stuff
look
like
forward to seeing how that turns out.
that. Yeah. Yeah. Did you have a recommendation of the week you wanted to share?
Okay, yeah, recommendation of the week. Give me just a moment. So, I have recently done. I get sucked into, and I love doing them. A lot of little like specific like themes for my watching, like little journeys that I go on.
Yeah.
I recently, you mentioned Film Spotting a few times. I recently had Josh Larson, Film Spotting, and Think Christian back on our show for a second time because he has a new book out on horror and what we can. It's called "Fear Not: A Christian Appreciation of Horror," and it's all about how by examining the things that scare us, like what we can learn about ourselves. And
Yeah.
really great book, really great conversation. Look for that in a few weeks. By the time this is out, we'll probably only have to wait a couple weeks, only a week or two for it. But my biggest revelation, I'd seen a lot of the movies he referenced, so I wanted to kind of fill in some gaps and try to pick one or two from some specific categories because he's got like 8 or 9 categories. So I ended up watching and loving. And I didn't realize it was in the Criterion Collection until after I watched it. But 1942, Jacques Tournier's Cat People.
Okay.
Really, really wonderful. Are you familiar with Cat People?
I am not in the least bit, honestly.
Paul Schrader made a very horny and very bizarre remake in the 80s. But this came out in 1942. It's about a Serbian immigrant who comes to the States and courts and marries this man, but she was kind of raised in a strict, essentially like a strict mystic fundamentalist upbringing, and she was kind of taught that when she lets her when she gives into her desires, that it's like evil and bad, and like she becomes like a panther, like a feral cat. So she tries to keep them at bay, and this movie is about her fear of like, and even like as a married woman, like engaging in her desires, like that she's gonna end up destroying the man she loves. It's a very fascinating movie that's shockingly relevant and progressive from the studio system in 1942. So
yeah,
I loved it.
I wonder if it would make a good double feature with Turning Red, the Pixar movie.
I don't think so. But it was wonderful. And
concept wise, that sounds similar. That's what it made when you were describing it. I was like, that sounds a little bit like Turning Red.
Could be.
Like
that could definitely make an interesting double feature for sure. I'll be getting that on the next the November Criterion sale. I'll probably be picking that up.
Yeah, that's one that's like totally off my radar. So that I love it when a recommendation comes for something I'm just like totally unaware of. So it is now on my watch list for Letterboxd. So this week I'm going to recommend actually a show that I'm not completely caught up with it. But I enjoy DC characters. I haven't kept up with the comics in a long time, but there's a few years where I was really keeping up with a lot of the DC comics, really into it. But yeah, I just really enjoy the characters in DC, and so I still haven't seen The Flash. It's streaming now, so I might.
I just saw it dropped. I was like, 2 hours, almost 2.5 hours.
Yeah, that's why I haven't gotten to it yet. But
I'll check it out sometime.
The Flash is actually my favorite DC character.
Okay.
And so it's one of those that I'm looking forward to the movie because it's my favorite character, but also like not looking forward to it because I hope they don't like mess it up, sort of thing.
Well, I'll tell you, a really
but
wonderful writer is about to take over the series, the comics, if you ever want to tune back in.
Yeah, I did see that. Actually. I might check them out. I know there's some, you can get them digitally now, so I might look into that. But that's not my recommendation because I haven't seen it. My recommendation is for a new animated show that's being released on Max, called My Adventures with Superman. And it's these 20 so minute animated episodes, a little animated show. And honestly, it's just kind of like I just kind of throw it on while I eat lunch, sort of show. I don't have to pay that close attention, and it's not like it's not a recommendation because like it's profound or amazing or whatever. It's just kind of like an enjoyable throw this on and watch kind of show. It's very much like kid friendly.
It looks good. I haven't watched it yet.
Yeah, it's just it's reminiscent of when like the Justice League show was really good.
Such a good show.
It's not like it's just like endearing. It's kind of like the beginning of Superman and Lois Lane and at the Daily Planet, and so like their relationship is budding, and it's like cute in that way, and it's very much like, I don't know, if you're an adult and you really don't watch anything that's made for kids, you probably won't enjoy it because it's very much like made for kids to be able to enjoy. But yeah, I enjoy watching, shows like that every once in a while. And I think Superman is sometimes like, he gets a bad rap for just being like, he's not an interesting character because he's just too strong. But the best Superman comics are like really some of the best comic books in general, I think. And so this show is really fun, just kind of him figuring out who he's going to be. It's good so far. I think it's going to finish with like 10 episodes. I think 9 of them are out now, and I've seen 6 of them. And it's fun. Yeah. So that's my recommendation of the week. My
Very
Adventures
nice.
with Superman, streaming on Max. So not a sponsor. But if they want to send some money my way, they're welcome to, I'm not opposed to it. But yeah, that's the show. Philip, why don't you, you've talked about the Substance podcast already, but why don't you kind of share where people can follow you and the show?
Yeah, I mean, I'm Philip Marinello, with one L and Philip on all the things, Letterboxd, Twitter, Instagram, all that good stuff. And then my podcast, The Substance, we are The Substance Pod on all the main platforms. But yeah, if you like movies, we got a lot of great movies. I'll maybe even send you the Letterboxd list that I update of all the substantive cinema movies that we've covered. Yeah, we've like I said, we've had Josh Larson. The last 2 guests we've had were actually Letterboxd employees who, if you listen to the Letterboxd Show podcast, you've heard them. We've had, who have we had? We've had Brett McCracken from the Gospel Coalition. We've had Alyssa Wilkinson from Vox. We've had Tyler Huckabee and Kevin McLenithan from Seeing and Believing. We love movies, and we sometimes get really great guests on.
Yeah.
But yeah, we also have stuff that covers like the church calendar, liturgies, theology, social issues. We've had a lot of wonderful guests, and back when I had regular co-hosts, we would cover topics ourselves. But yeah, no, it's a great time. We just launched our Patreon, so me and my editor might be making some new episodes ourselves, depending on how well the Patreon does. But yeah, The Substance has been a blast. We're somewhere in the 130s probably. when this
Mhm.
comes out, and we plan on going for a long time.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I caught up with it recently. We connected, and yeah, I checked out the podcast. I really enjoyed Everything Everywhere All at Once. Y'all did an episode on that. That was a really great episode. Yeah, I look forward to digging into more of y'all's stuff for sure. But I'll make sure to link all that in the show notes so people can find it easily if Natalie in their life hid all their pens and they couldn't write it down, then
Yeah, right.
have no fear. I'll put it in the show notes. You can just click the link. But yeah, I really enjoyed having you on, Philip. I really appreciate you coming on, and yeah, that's it for this week. Look forward to talking about Insomnia next week. But until then, you've been listening to the Establishing Shot. And yeah, I've been Eli Price for Philip Marinello. We will see you next time. Thank you so much for joining us on the Establishing Shot today. We hope you enjoyed the episode and got a lot out of it. Make sure before you go to like and subscribe on all your podcast platforms, and especially on Spotify and Apple. If you could leave a rating and review, that would greatly help the visibility of the podcast, and I would greatly appreciate it. Again, if you go to establishingshotpod.com, you can find out all you need to know about the show, where to find us on the social media platforms, where to find us podcast-wise, YouTube, and you can even leave a voicemail there on the website on the right side of your screen. So click that if you want to give a comment or ask a question about the show. Just feel free to leave a voicemail. We'd be happy to feature that on the show. And also, if you just want to email rather than leave a voicemail, you can email us at establishingshotpod@gmail.com, and we would be happy to answer your question there or feature a question or comment on the show if it pertains to the episodes. So please do that, and we would love for you to join the Establishing Shot family. You can, again, find where to do that on the donate page at establishingshotpod.com. We hope you have a great week, and we look forward to seeing you again next time.
We were happy here. For a little while.
But look, I figure it this way. Better to be king for a night than schmuck for a lifetime.